Regarding public input, public input shall be limited to statements from the public relating to any issues with the jurisdiction of the Chelmsford Zoning Board of Appeals that are not currently the subject of a pending public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Public comment on any pending public hearing shall be only heard during such public hearings. That being said, is there any public input tonight? Seeing none, we go to new business. Going to have a discussion with Evan Belansky of the Community Development Director regarding potential zoning changes pertaining to the percentage lot coverage and floor area ratio.
So good evening. It's good to see all of you again. What was going to be a much more involved discussion this evening has evolved into a very simple update and conversation. And so it came to my attention over the last probably 30 days that the board was perplexed and confused and puzzled by several variances applications that came to you related to lot building coverage and FAR. And over that last 30 days, been engaged with Becky and Jose. And I think some of the board members who've been around pre-2018, 2019 likely recall that we had a Section 2 within the 195.8 that, and I provided that on the second page of the handout, that inadvertently was deleted as part of the fall 2019 update. Section 2 is the specific provision that provides clarity, would have provided clarity, and would not have resulted in Jose, myself, or an applicant or an attorney, staff member of the board having any confusion as to pre-existing non-conforming single and two-family. So in order to be brief and simplify this, what I would ask tonight is that either tonight or at your next meeting, that the Zoning Board of Appeals instruct me to work with the Planning Board to reinsert Section 2. And in summary, Section 2 basically says that in the event Jose cannot deem, for purposes of single and two-family, that he cannot issue a by right building permit, that all pre-existing nonconformities for single and two-family go directly to the zoning board as a special permit. The notion that it would require a variance is not consistent with Mass General Law, and as board members know from past experience, as well as the previous zoning bylaw, we had never required variances for pre-existing nonconformities related to single and two families. So I want to come here, certainly apologize for creating the confusion. Certainly my oversight, and just completely forgot about it of Section 2 between 2019 and the current situation.
Well, thank you.
Okay. So
Are there any questions of the board of Evan?
okay. So with the board's permission, like I said, I would like to re-engage with the planning board. They're currently identifying zoning articles to forward for Springtown meeting in April. The timing works out. This is pretty straightforward. The backstory is a little embarrassing, but I think it's straightforward. So what I'd be looking for tonight, again, is just some clear indication from the zoning board that you had assumed that we were still operating with Section 2 and that you would like to have that
Continue in
reinserted.
that format. We apply that this evening to one of the applications, 12 Sylvan Ave, that's coming up.
I believe you may have two applications in front of you this evening. As
correct,
my understanding, I think the board is aware that you can always determine that what is advertised as a variance can be
It's gonna be
handled
the
as a special
lesser-
permit, correct?
Right.
Can I ask,
Even an 11 rainbow would also apply.
I
at that
believe
point.
so,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
So there was no reason why it was taken out purposely? There was
It was,
no,
Omission.
yeah, it was inadvertent. The Section E that is referenced as to why these were identified as needing a variance, Section E is currently worded where it says you have to comply with setbacks and current building coverage, height, and FAR. The reason that that's in there, and it's still important to be in there, is because the town does not want the building commissioner to be able to issue by right building permits where there's concern about mansionization. So building coverage and FAR speak directly to mansionization.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when
Yep.
they did it, and it was part of the theory was that it would allow the building inspector to put some things through without having to come in front of us, like
Right,
the
but it
really
doesn't
basic,
tie our
yeah.
hands with a
Primarily-
variance.
So
Primarily for
with that new
setbacks.
section E, with the verbiage that's in the new section E, are we just sure that this doesn't
Yeah, the new section would be page,
Because this is the old, like, putting number 2 back in.
yep.
I just want to make sure that that doesn't contradict any of the new verbiage that's in section E.
It
'Cause
doesn't.
Went
It-
with the old verbiage, right?
It's
So-
two separate processes.
Yeah.
So the first process is at the building inspector level.
Yeah.
And the building commissioner will review it and make a determination as to whether or not it complies with, with the requirements for an as-of-right change. And if it does, then it just moves forward. If he
Yeah.
determines that it doesn't meet those requirements, then it shifts over to the other review, and that's when it comes in front of this board for a special permit for a finding that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Okay. And this allows for that.
Correct.
Yeah, which is why it needs to go back in, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because before this particular portion of the bylaw was adopted, everything was coming to the board
Yeah.
For that
Stuff that really
determination.
didn't
And it
need
was
to
one
be.
after
So it was an
another.
effort to kind of streamline some of the stuff
Exactly.
and allow the building
To
inspector
to save the
push through
public,
yeah.
who are making very minor modifications to their
Correct.
pre-existing non-conforming
And I think that
structures.
worked. I think that alleviated a lot of.
I agree,
yeah.
I'm all for
But
it.
this is a little, yeah, a little.
Yeah, this
glitch.
this creates clarity.
Yeah.
It's reinserting section 2.
That's good.
And so I'm glad we covered this while I'm here. If there's any other zoning issues that you've identified either individually or as a board, send me an email and we can, we'll workshop it and we'll figure out a
See
solution.
if there's an avenue we can proceed.
Correct,
Excellent.
correct. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first public hearing, there are no administrative reviews. Our first public hearing is 12 Sylvan Avenue. It's a continuation requesting a variance, which will now become a special permit under Section 195.8, nonconformity, and/or Section 195.9, conformity for exceeding floor area and lot coverage percentage. Any other relief that may be deemed necessary to construct a 9.1 foot by 22.1 foot addition, which will not increase the existing nonconformity of the front side setback. This property is located in the residential B district. Mr. Slattery here this evening? Good evening. If I could have your name and address for the record, please?
Yep, it's Joseph Slattery. I live at 12 Sylvan Ave. So I'm here to discuss my request for an addition. I know I have some updated paperwork that I have provided some packets for you guys.
Okay.
The plot plan had some inaccuracies, but based on our discussion, I'll stay here and talk on the microphone. Based on our discussions about lot coverage and variance, I wanted to put in some additional details, what the current size of the house was, the primary dwelling, what the proposal was, so I worked.
Numbers we didn't have last. month.
Exactly,
Yeah,
correct.
Great.
I can press it. Thank you.
Do you think we can put this up on the screen, or is that giving us trouble for this? Maybe the plot plan would be best. So this is an addition we went into detail into last month, and it's been continued. The addition itself is on the first and second floor, and the problem was the FAR, the floor area ratio, and the lot size being too small for it. So with the change we've made, this will go from a variance to a special permit.
Okay, I also have a picture of the home for reference while we're
Oh, thank you.
talking through it.
With the change we just made just now, with the discussion with Evan, Is that,
Yes.
we can use that now?
Well, it isn't really,
It doesn't have to
it
go
was
through
omitted. It really isn't a change. Maybe Paul can
Yeah,
explain.
so the bylaw has specific provisions addressing pre-existing non-conforming uses and structures. However, also overriding that is General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6. That sets the minimum standards for what has to be provided for relief for non-conforming structures. So this would, this would be something that is allowed under Chapter 48,
Okay,
Section 6.
so we can use that.
Yes,
to
correct.
Make it a special
Yeah,
permit.
the
Okay.
bylaw doesn't have to be changed for this to continue to be done.
Thank you. See, that's quick. Very efficient.
That was quick, right? Usually it's 6 months. So. Are there any questions from the board this evening? Seeing none, I'm going to open this up to the public. If anyone has any comments in favor or in opposition to this application, now is the time. Sletta, you could give her the podium. I could ask your name and address, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Ann McKenzie. I live just across the street from the Slattery's at 7 Sylvan Avenue. I would like to vote in favor myself of allowing for the special permit. I know there's concern about, just keeping, for lack of a better term, the architectural integrity given the lot size and whatnot, but the proposal that Joe and Jenna have showed to us as neighbors, at least in my mind, looking across the street at their home every day would not, in my mind, deter from that integrity. Maybe more importantly, and it is anecdotally, but I would say I've lived at my home now for almost 12 years, and Joe and Jenna moved in across the street shortly thereafter. We have 2 new neighbors on either side of my home, and if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, the friendships that our neighborhood, including the Slattery's, have made are immeasurable in my mind. And I just would think that it's such a bonus for this town to have folks that think and feel that there is such strong community. And I would hate to lose that community by this potentially not going through and the Slattery's having to potentially consider whether or not this home is the right fit for them anymore. So I would love for this to pass in the hopes, again, of I don't think it would take away from the integrity of the architectural piece, but at the same time, just from a personal perspective, we have grown incredibly close, and I would love to have them stay. So, thank you for your time.
Are there any other comments this evening?
Mr. Chair, the applicant had submitted this packet yesterday, and there's other letters of support within the packet as well.
There's like 10 letters in there.
Maybe I could just, they all,
They're all
The
we
affirmative?
support, yes.
so we'll just enter those in the record, I think, and save us a little time. Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second by Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
I think we can take this up directly. We spent a lot of time on it last month, and I think everyone felt very strongly that if it wasn't a variance, we would be able to move ahead with it. But I'll certainly let the vote speak for itself.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the special permit, not a variance, under section 195-8 for 12 Sylvan Avenue.
A second.
All in
So just-
favor?
I think you just want to make it clear that you're voting, that you're making a finding that the proposal will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure.
Of course.
Include that verbiage in the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Good luck with it.
A better ending than it was last month, so good luck with it. So I'm done out of order, that's what I did with this doing I.
See what happens when you invite me here?
Yeah, it goes
It was tough,
smoothly.
everybody felt very sure that it was, a very minor addition to, the property. Getting back in order, we're going to hear 23 Chelmsford Street. June Liu, I hope I'm saying that right, is requested a special permit under section 195, attachment 1, to run a massage therapy business and any other relief deemed necessary. This property is located at the Center Village District.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If I could get your name and address for the record, please.
June
last name Liu, Liu. 90 Quincy Short Drive.
Thank you. Are you going to have a massage therapy?
Yes.
Good, I'm not sure quite what to ask you. We don't really have any paperwork. Are there any
Have
questions
technical
of the board?
questions.
No, we've done this before. We just ask them if they have a license, Brian, and.
That's a good idea.
do-
Yeah, I mean, we've submitted, I think,
Yeah.
a letter with a summary. By the way, my name's John McLaughlin. I'm an attorney at 44 School Street in Boston, and I'm here as her attorney, but also as someone that can give her, a high recommendation and reference. Very simply, she has a licensed massage therapist in Massachusetts. She went to massage school in Manchester, New Hampshire. She's worked for the last 3 years to perfect her craft, and she's hoping to open up her own massage therapy business here at 23 Chelmsford Way as a small businesswoman. It's an 1,100 square foot suite. Initially, she'll be, a startup business. It'll just be her, and she'll be offering, what could be a valuable service to the community of, good massage therapy. And she's well qualified, and I think she certainly, as I understand it from reviewing your bylaw, this is, within the Center Village District, this is a special permit that's kind of required, so.
I think anywhere in town is a requirement, so.
So I think that she's well qualified, and I think that the nature of the business is a valuable service to the community, and it should be within the criteria for a special permit, and I hope you'll act favorably on it. But if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions or is in opposition or favor to this, now is the time to speak. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close.
Nancy?
No second.
Peter, seconds. Questions or concerns from the board?
None at all.
I'll make
Make a
a motion to approve the special permit under section 195, attachment 1, to run a massage therapy business and any other relief deemed necessary at the Center Village District, parcel ID, map 73, block 327, lot 12.
I second.
Second with Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
Okay?
Good luck with it.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Our next hearing is 53 Parkhurst Road. Lamar Freeman, on behalf of Dish Wireless. Good evening. We weren't sure if you were here, so that's why I was just checking. I just got a little reading to do. Requesting a modification to a previously approved wireless facility special permit for the installation of an additional 3 antennas and other related equipment onto the existing cellular tower and platform, and any other relief deemed necessary. This property is located in the CB district. Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosanna Ferranti, and I'm here on behalf of this permit and this application. My address is 100 Apollo Drive, Chelmsford, Massachusetts. So I'm here to present, Crown Castle owns the tower, the existing tower, and Dish would like to attach 3 antennas onto the existing platform.
Okay.
So that is what we're proposing. There's already a couple of different carriers there installed. And so by going on an existing tower, it eliminates the need to find
Another
to build
location for it.
Exactly.
Excellent. Are there any questions from the board regarding this application?
I'm almost surprised that they need a special permit since they're using an existing pole that, because I.
Just to clarify.
Okay.
Certainly.
Oh, sure.
This doesn't come up very often for us.
Yeah, I mean, since I'm here, again, Jose and Paul Haverty, town council, have been heavily involved in this. And we sought town council's input on this. You are correct. For a period of time, cell tower modifications were taking place. However, those were an even exchange. When we started,
down and one would go
exactly.
up.
When we started getting applications within the last probably year to a year and a half, That's when we reached out to council to get clarification. The proponents submitted that their position was that they were protected or covered under the federal statute. Again, we reached out to council to get clarification and guidance, and council came back and suggested and recommended that if you're increasing the number of antennae above and beyond what the zoning board originally approved, the best way to handle that locally was a modification to the special permit.
Okay.
So we used to have a limit on the number of antennae that there
We
could be.
approved a number of them. So if you came and you said, I want to put up a cell tower, we'll have 7 antennas for different vendors. That's what we would approve. So now where 3 are being added, they're looking for a modification. The tower remains the same height.
Correct,
that sort
right.
of-
So the tower is an existing special permit today, and so this is adding 3 antennas to the, so it is a modification to an existing permit to add 3 additional
I
antennas.
honestly
to
don't
it.
think you'd even notice it if it were visually. I
And
mean,
the one thing I would add is that the federal law is the Telecommunications Act, and it really places a lot of limitations on local boards in terms of how they can condition
Stop it,
or prevent cell towers from going in. So you really don't have a lot of leeway on this.
Or limiting the number of
Correct.
antenna that are on there.
Certainly, it would
Yes,
be
but
much
just procedurally, it's much
Yeah.
cleaner to get to.
much
stop
easier
re- I'll
to
stop
use an
reading
existing
then. I'll
tower.
Much easier
I'm
for
learning some
everybody.
things, but
Excellent. I'll open this up to the audience. Are there any questions or comments regarding this application? Seeing none, can I get a motion to close the
Make a motion to close the public hearing for, what was that?
53 Parkhurst?
53 Parkhurst Road.
Second by Steve, all in favor? Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve the wireless special permit for the installation of additional 3 antennas and other related equipment into the existing cell tower and platform on the property in the CB district, parcel ID, or parcel map 32, block 110, lot 13. That enough?
Second. Second by Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Thank you.
Good luck with it. Doing your job.
hoping for better cell phone coverage.
Our next application is 11 Rainbow Ave. Sarah and Gary Brown are requesting a special permit under section 195, 6.1 for a limited accessory apartment, LAA, and variances for the side setback requirement, the maximum building lot coverage, and the floor area ratio, and any other relief deemed necessary. This property is located in the RB district. And as we discussed earlier, anything of Stouser, the floor area and the lot coverage would be a special permit instead of a variance at this point. The dimensional requirements still stand.
Good evening. For the record, Douglas Hausler of Lampert, Hausler and Rodman, representing the applicants, Sarah and Gary Brown. With me tonight is, besides Sarah and Gary, is Gino Valere, who's Sarah's brother, who would be the builder of this, and Brian Malisi of Haley and Ward, who's the project engineer. Before we get too far into it, I want to submit some updated building plans of what this proposed addition is. That corrects a location of where one of the stairwells was going to be. So this will lay out much more carefully exactly what is being asked to be built. If I may approach.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Quick synopsis of this. The property at 11 Rainbow is in an RB district. It's an existing single-family home. At one point, it had a garage attached to it. That garage was converted into living space without expanding the perimeter footprint of the structure. So it only had to go through the building department, and I did not have to get any kind of zoning relief. This application is seeking to add 504 new square feet, as represented on the diagrams that have been submitted to the board and the plans. I believe it's 14 by 36 are the dimensions that are being added here. The house was originally built, I believe, in 1957. It's on a 10,720 square foot lot in an RB district. It's the classic, what we just heard from Evan, it's the classic experience of a lot of people in Chelmsford. And I forgot that Evan was going to make this presentation tonight because he made my job a lot easier. I was all concerned about it. But now that we're dealing with special permits, I feel a lot better for these applicants. This addition, there's a significant issue here is this addition is critical for this family to stay. It's so that they can have Sarah's mom move in with them to help provide care for a disabled child who requires 24/7, 365 days a year care. And without this relief, it's going to create extreme emotional and physical hardship on these folks. I know that's not part of your variance, but I want you to understand the context in which you're listening to this application. And in context with that, they've tried as best to minimize how much it had to be expanded to make it usable without being, tipped right to the point of, right to the edge of the perimeter of the lot line. They have spoken, I believe, with their neighbor who would be most affected. So when you're looking at the right side from the street of the house, the person that's most affected is their neighbor on the right. Nobody else really was affected by what's being proposed, and it's our understanding that there was not going to be any objection to this. They were aware of what was going on. At least that's what we believe. I know they've met with them. I did not. It's a non-conforming structure in every single way. And I guess the easiest way to describe why you should grant the relief is because if this exact house on 10,720 square feet was located in an RC district, in which there are literally hundreds of homes that are in that district, we wouldn't be before you for anything. We would meet every single zoning criteria. And that's because, quite frankly, the zoning bylaw is completely out of sync with the realities of this particular neighborhood. So I find it absolutely, I think it's compelling for you to make a finding. There's no substantial deviation, because if the RC standards of dimensional relief or required dimensions are satisfied in an RC district with much smaller amounts, 10 side yard, 10 feet, rear yard 20. How can that be for hundreds of homes, but not this one home, because it just happens to be in an RB district surrounded by homes that all should be classified RC? I think it speaks for itself that each of the requested relief sought by the applicant to build this addition is satisfied, because there's no substantial detriment to the integrity or the intent of the zoning bylaw, no derogation from it. I don't believe anybody's going to suffer any prejudice if you allow it. And I'd ask you to grant all required relief to allow this addition to be built as soon as possible. We're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. We are 11.8 feet over the setback allowed. The special permit would only be 5 feet. Are there any questions from the board regarding this?
I have a question. Why are the RB and the RC requirements so different? Seems like it's kind of a stupid question, seeing I've been here for years. I feel like I should know
I
this
mean, it
already,
was
but-
determined probably before any of us were born but they're fairly significant. I don't know why.
They are significant, like, it's never, it doesn't come up a lot, you know?
Right, maybe it caught up to me, I don't know. I mean, the RC is significantly less, and RB is identical
Is there a,
to the RA,
I
so
mean, is
that's,
there a reason? Are the RC lots generally
RC
smaller
allows you
so
to
as
have a
accommodate for
two-family
that?
by right.
Yeah.
I don't know where,
They're close to the center villages in Vinyl Square. So they're within walking distance of your commercial shopping areas. And across the street. Yes. So they're, on the zoning map, RC is,
Yeah.
you can walk to the centers, and they're smaller lots in the historic
Yeah, so they tend to be
laid out neighborhoods.
So they tend to be like smaller lots with bigger houses, so they made the setbacks smaller for those, or to kind of
I think it
accommodate for
reflects- I
that?
think it reflects the historical.
What's existing? The
historical
existing
building. Yeah, the historical
so I
building
might be
environment.
there, yeah, that's, but probably they took what was there and
yeah,
decided what
based
is
on
a
that.
mean or an average for it.
Yeah,
Because almost everything in RC, maybe that's not fair, but a lot of it was pre-existing,
yeah.
Yeah.
so.
To Doug's point, in lieu of the planning board and town meeting voting to change the zoning map,
Yeah,
which has a variety of other implications, the strategy has been trying to come up with strategies and solutions to assist the zoning board and the property owners to streamline the process to seek zoning relief.
okay, I see.
And just to give you some ease of conscience, if you're thinking of granting the application, there was a case issued, and Paul probably knows about it. It's Buckland versus Conover. It's a Judge Sands land court case, which cited some appeals court decisions. But one of it said, while the zoning statute disfavors extensions of existing nonconformities, there was some really great language in there, and the court upheld this. The court held that the statute, quote, does not require non-conforming properties to remain static. And that's exactly what we have here. If you don't grant the relief, they could do absolutely nothing to this property without increasing a nonconformity. And that's not the intent of the zoning bylaw. We're not making a McMansion out of this property.
I agree.
So we ask that you apply your common sense and take a look at what the surrounding neighborhood is and grant the required relief so that these folks can move forward.
Brian, are there any letters from number 9? Where it would,
Lay in this file, or do you have a?
no.
It would be there. I don't think we have any letters. We have letters from the town?
No comments from any.
None, okay. So there are no letters.
Where is it where they connect from the LLA to the house? I'm not,
Stairwell?
in
Yeah.
the stairwell?
So inside the garage, to the rear, there's an internal stairway.
Okay,
And outside, to have a second means of egress, there's a stairwell coming down. You need to have two,
okay.
okay?
So it's through the
They
stairway.
pass through the garage to enter the or they can.
They
pass
can.
through the garage.
They have an outside entranceway and an inside garage entranceway.
So, yeah, no living area.
The special permit would be at 13 and a half feet? That's where the special
No,
permit
the
would end.
special permit will be issued at 20. So dimensionally, we still need a variance. The special permit would go to the FAR and the lot coverage. But we still, our
What about the
setback,
side setback?
correct, is on an RB, the side setback is 25 feet. If it were an RC, it would be 12, but
It says
it's not.
15 on here, on this.
Yeah, it says 15 on the plat.
I'm going out of the zoning book here. I've got an RB, side setback in feet is 25. Is that correct?
I believe it's due to the year it was built.
It says right here.
And their plot plan.
Oh, it says-
Oh, on the plot,
Jose,
yeah.
what is your opinion of the required setback for this lot?
That would be 17 feet on the side. It was built in 1957. It's an RB.
So 17.
1957.
17 feet on the
What's
side.
20% of 17?
3.4.
So that would take us to
I think we just get there then.
13 point.
From 17 is
13.6.
7?
Oh, you're talking inches, I'm talking decimals, so.
Right, I'll stick with decimals, because that's where it's at. They've got the foot marker, but it is a decimal, so it is tenths.
Up there on the first one.
So we need to be 13.6 and we're 13.2, based on that.
Right.
Can I see this?
Yeah.
Why the heck does it work?
So that is fine. So this would be a special permit dimensionally as
Oh,
well.
we need to get,
Well,
we're just
Am
off.
I missing something there?
well, I have a question in terms of the nature of the existing nonconformities. Is there an existing nonconformity as to lot coverage?
No,
So that's gonna need a variance.
right. That does.
Because this is
It could
not a
be-
pre-existing
Because,
non-conformity.
you can't create a new nonconformity
Nonconformity.
through a finding.
Right.
You can only allow an expansion of an existing nonconformity.
So now the variance would be for the side setback and the coverage.
Well, no, the side yes. the
Being
side-
satisfied here.
Yeah, because,
Satisfied the side setback
Yeah.
at
No,
I don't think we
17.
do.
I was
Because-
referring to this, which is 25.
with the 20% reduction, you don't satisfy the side setback?
No, this,
Well, first of all,
No,
the
it's
side-
only 13 feet. It needs to be.
When this
17.
house was originally constructed, the side yard setback was 15 feet.
yeah, but he just said 17 is what Jose told us.
Based on the town record to 17.
They'll only be 13 anyway, so either way, they don't,
Do
they're not gonna make it.
do you know the date? Are you referring to a different date than Jose has for the construction of the home?
Excuse me, Brian Wilson with Hazel Wood. We were just referring to the assessor's records of when the house was originally built, and then going to, I'm gonna forget the section number, but it's the historic offsets. And I very well would defer to Jose. I had thought it was 15, that's what I put on the plan, very well could be 17.
That's these, right?
Depending on exactly what date you pick.
So Jose, your opinion is
It's
17.
25 feet that calls for currently in the RB zoning district.
When was it constructed?
1957, we believe.
Yeah, so, and what was the zoning district at the time?
So it's always been RB, I believe.
Well, no, the zoning
There
district.
wasn't
There's
any kind of,
RA1, RA2, and RA3.
it didn't exist though, I think, in that time period.
So
I
it was
think the
RA2.
RAs
RB didn't
created
exist, yeah.
subsequent to that,
Okay.
1961 or 57 or something like that.
Well, this says 1956 to 1961, and it says RA, it would be 25, RA2 would be 17,
Right.
and RA3 it would be 15. In general residence, it would be 12. So I presume that those districts existed at that time.
I was going by what's published in the actual bylaw.
Which is right here.
If you go to the zoning map and bylaw sections on town's website.
That's what I'm reading from, is the
There was a
bylaw.
gap though for that period of time.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just
Yeah, please approach.
this is the historic map that goes along with that section, and I know all these roadways are on, Lock Road. I'm looking at it upside down now, but we were right in
Well,
the
there's,
center.
addressing that issue on the side, I just want to address the lot coverage area. So it's,
Yeah, well, this, Brian, this shows single residence A1, single residence A2, single residence A3.
Correct, and now you
general
go up
residence.
here to where it is, and it gives you the 1, the 2s, or whatever it may be.
But if it's the 1, then it's greater, it's 25.
Right.
So it's gotta fall right between.
Right, so it's in this area here, right?
So if it's 3, then it will be,
Then it's 15.
it's 15.
That's 15, right.
So it is 15?
15 is acceptable?
If it's RA3, it's a 15-foot side setback as
so
of
therefore it would be a special permit acceptable
1956 to
For the side,
61.
yeah.
for the side. So the only issue then that requires a variance, according to what I'm hearing, is the floor, the
The lot
building coverage area.
The lot coverage.
Lot coverage, and we're at 14.4. This addition brings it up to 19.1. But it's not again, it's not a McMansion area. And then number two, it's a 10,000 square foot lot. As I said,
Right,
we're
it's-
applying a 40,000 foot lot standard
To a quarter of that.
quarter acre. It doesn't make any sense. I think that in and of itself is an unfair hardship. It's a defect in the zoning bylaw. As for the other portion of the variance standard, I think, we've already, I think, talked about literal enforcement creates substantial hardship. I think that's satisfied. The relief is not going to be substantially detrimental or derogate from the intent of the zoning bylaw. We know that this house, even with the expansion, is entirely consistent with the neighborhood. So those two things are satisfied. So then the question becomes, the soil shape or topography of the land or the structure not affecting generally the zoning district. The structure here limits what we can do. There's really no other place to do this addition whatsoever.
It would be just as, there's no, can I just understand, why doesn't the .25 lot size create a non-conforming lot where the requirement would be 40,000 feet and they have 10? Why doesn't that by itself make it a non-conforming lot? So dramatically undersized.
Ask that again?
So the fact that the minimum lot area for an RB is 40,000 and they have
Yep.
10,000, why doesn't that create a non-conformity?
It does create a non-conformity as to lot area.
That doesn't affect our need for a special permit. That still leaves it at a variance.
Lot coverage is a separate dimensional requirement.
But it is tied to lot area. They're inextricably woven. You can't, they're based on the lot area. That's how you calculate it.
In my opinion, and I defer, of course, to Paul, but it's not a 40,000 square foot lot, so to hold it to the standard of a 40,000 foot lot seems
That was my-
impossible, especially in this particular case.
And that was my point from the beginning with the RC district, which means is
Right, no, I
absolutely
understand
legal.
your point. Well, if it isn't, but if it was.
But how is it being held to the standard of a 40,000 square foot lot? The requirement is based upon a percentage of the lot size.
Right, but when the zoning bylaws were adopted for an RB district, it envisioned 1 acre lots
Okay, but
by
it's-
definition.
But it's still, the percentage is on the actual lot area, it's not on.
No, I
the
agree with
40,000
you,
square
but-
foot requirement, so that, that requirement goes down. I mean, I guess
The smaller the lot, the quicker the
the
lot
smaller,
coverage area
yeah, the
is
smaller the structure you can
impacted.
have. I mean, that's just inherent in.
I
the way it
agree with
is.
you, Paul, 100%. That's true, but what I'm having difficulty as a human being understanding, put my lawyer hat aside, because we know human being and lawyer never go together. So,
That's hurtful.
right? I won't ask Nancy that, I'll only ask you. But I would say, I think that's the logic we have to apply here, is what is in this town? I mean, how can it be legal for hundreds of homes to meet this lot coverage area at as we're proposing at 19.1? We'd be under the 20% that lot, an RC lot would be required to have at 20,000 square feet. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not an equal application of the standard overall. That's all I'm asking you to take that into consideration.
I mean, I
It's a
think that
hardship.
goes to the standard of derogation from the zoning bylaws,
Right.
as part of the variance test. When you're talking about a pre-existing non-conforming lot, inherently, your available lot area is going to be smaller, and is there some willingness to take that into account and recognize that it's not really derogating from the intent of the bylaw?
That's a great way to phrase it.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for the board?
I would go running off, but not yet.
I'm trying, Brian.
I'm going to open this up to the audience and see if there's any comments in favor or opposition to this particular application at this time. Seeing none and with no letters, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
think now's a good time to do it, close the public hearing, and,
Do you have any more questions?
you know, all the questions are answered by Paul, so I'm all set, but I just wanted to make sure everybody else is all set.
audience is
I'll make
all
a
set?
motion to close the public hearing.
Second? Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
We can reopen it if things arise,
Okay.
but I don't know what else we can talk about. I mean, becomes a question of if, are we gonna make a motion to approve?
I feel like this is tricky. I don't see that, like, if you're looking for the standard hardships, we don't have the standard hardships. We don't have letters from the neighbors. We don't have, I don't know.
No, Paul mentioning the percentage reducing as the lot shrinks is accurate. I mean, it does reduce as
Yeah,
the
but I
size
think
shrinks.
that-
and physics, right?
I think
is
there
you-
is a
it's
purpose,
just
yeah,
it's
that's
a
the
ratio,
purpose of
so-
the zoning bylaw, right? Is to like, for the houses to fit the sizes of the lots. So in my mind, I think that's
So that
the
suggests
intent.
if you want a mansion, you would have to go out and buy a
A bigger
large
lot.
plot of land to
Yeah.
fit it on. You wouldn't,
To accommodate the size of the building.
to
right.
maintain the ratio of
Yeah, I think
house
there's a little bit of a
to
dangerous
land, but
slide. I mean, you can't put a house with a 20,000 square foot footprint on a 10,000 square foot lot, right?
Right, well,
So-
keeping in mind, that's not what we're doing. I
Well,
mean,
no, no,
I think
no,
you
I
can draw
know,
that
but-
hard line in the sand, but this appears to be slightly over the allowable size. There's certainly a hardship for the care.
Well, yeah, the LLA makes it more complicated, right? It's like a whole other.
And I think generational living is critical, I really do. So,
I guess I'd say I'd follow the attorney and say, I'd like to put away my engineer hat and go to my human being. And yeah, I like this as a human being, but my engineering, rule-following, mathematical, I mean, I'm disagreeable, but I'm consistent.
that sort of sounds like a motion.
So the variance is just, it's for the coverage.
I guess,
Yes,
do we
the
even
lot
address
coverage.
whether we could like
And then it'll be
shrink
a
it?
And then
The-
it's a
the
special permit for
coverage
the.
At all?
How far over is it? Like, what would it have
That's,
to
would it
be?
that's what I'm
to-
trying to say, like, how much is it something that we could potentially get smaller?
Brian, do you
and
have
then we don't have
the,
that issue? We have to
gotta
open it
reopen.
we're
again.
gonna end up at,
Gotta reopen.
the building coverage is.
Oh, I thought it went from 14 to 19% or something, someone said.
Yeah, 14.4 to 4+4.7, so 19.1%.
Yeah, it's got it right there, right below.
Oh, 19.1, right.
Sorry.
Thank God my math was good, that's good.
That's the requirement.
Oh, okay.
And we are allowed
Look at my
15.
book.
And we're allowed 15, is that right?
Yeah, so you'd have to
400 on 1,900.
cut 80%.
Yeah, that's a lot.
We're not right around the
It
corner.
would really reduce the size
Yeah.
of it.
I don't think it'd be there. I mean, put the stairwell and call it a day or something.
So that goes to the standard, which is based on lot shape.
Realistically, we'd be losing 400 feet
Is
of
there
a
a lot of-
504 square foot
Obviously,
addition.
your soil conditions tie in here.
That just really isn't gonna change.
That definitely, the hardship part is the second sort of
Right.
portion of the test.
Can you repeat that, Paul? What was
So when you're looking at meeting the variance standards, you have to look at whether or not there's a hardship related to the soil conditions, topography, or lot shape.
Yep.
And Attorney Hausler was right, that it also does look at, based upon that, or the structure. So I mean, case law is not really very helpful at looking at structure aspect of the variance standard, but it's something to take into account. But when you're talking about a hardship, that hardship is supposed to tie into one of those factors.
And wasn't life safety an additional?
Yes.
I don't know how that works. I don't think we've come up across it, but I thought that life safety was also
Provisions of the
a
ordinance.
consideration for a variance.
Which an LLA might fall into?
I'm sorry?
Which this might fall into as an LLA, is that what you're thinking?
Not because it's an LLA. because it's for the care of someone in critical need. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't.
There is case law.
The question is, I'm not suggesting as much as trying to understand it.
Right, so there is case law upholding variances relating to compliance with disability access, architectural access board, and things of that nature. I don't know like how that would apply here.
It isn't germane to this.
I don't know
In
if
your
it is or
opinion.
not. I don't know, I don't think you've heard any evidence, that you could really rely upon, if you want to reopen the public hearing and ask the applicant that.
I'm comfortable asking that. I think there's a certain amount of
Can I make a motion
personal
to reopen
information
the
there.
public
but-
hearing, Brian?
Second by Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
And I think you can ask that question without, requiring them to
Too much personal
give
information.
personal information, but just sort of tie it to what's being done there.
Would you be comfortable speaking a little on why it needs to be this size to accommodate who may be living there? Is that something you can respond to?
All I can answer is that it fits within the square footage requirements of the LAA. That's for certain.
I mean, it's well under, actually.
Well
so-
under it. The other issue is, it's trying to find really what we considered the minimal living area for a person to reside with their family but have their own apartment. I mean, we're trying to be consistent with the LAA standards, yet we're struggling, and you're struggling with the zoning requirement, which I've said is incredibly burdensome here. It doesn't make any sense. I just don't understand. I'm having trouble with the fact that it's got to be a hardship if 100 other homes on a lot of 10,000 square feet and it can meet that requirement somewhere else. But because it's this district and because it's been called RB, arbitrarily, I'll say, somehow denies these folks the right to have an LAA to help their child, that's absurd. I think we need some common sense here. And quite frankly, the only way it's going to get challenged is that some butter comes up to your board and challenges the decision of the board. It certainly isn't going to be precedent. Each application's on its own. It's a unique piece of land. So if the board was to grant it, the question is, would it ever be successfully challenged by an abutter? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't see any abutters here challenging this. And the one that is most affected has indicated to my client, they're happy with it. They're happy to see this being done. So the person who's most affected is all in favor. I'd hope the board would be in favor as well.
Any further questions?
Well, I was just thinking, I guess you could do this if we went to the third floor. Could we do it then?
Wouldn't that
Wouldn't
look
that just
worse,
increase the
technically?
floor
Height
area?
and
Would,
number of stories.
we wouldn't have the total building coverage of 19, it'd still be 14.
Because it wouldn't add to the lot coverage.
No. I know that's not what anybody wanted to hear.
But like if the addition were over the rest of the house here, and then this was just made the garage, which is what it was, right, originally? This was originally a garage.
Because I'm trying to think of a way to approve it also.
It was a garage, and then
What is, I believe now called the
garage.
family room was the
Oh,
garage, if I'm
yeah.
understanding this correctly.
And if you look at some of the houses around it,
That
they
didn't
still are.
change the footprint.
Yeah, no,
Similar, and they have
I'm
that- they
quite
have the
familiar with,
garage
but yeah,
in
they
there.
basically take out the door, put in a window
Yeah.
or another door, and move on. Would your client be amenable to looking at an option to reduce that lot coverage area? I think there's a plan, I'm sure you've looked at many options, but is that something that you want to try and reduce the coverage area?
if they reduce it, it's gotta go below 15 to not be a variance, correct?
Basically not an addition
Yeah, so
on the lot. It could be an addition over the home,
Yeah, it'd have to
but
be
it
over.
couldn't be the area of the lot. It couldn't increase by 100 feet or some crazy thing.
What if the 20% rule apply to the 15? We would be allowed to go to 18%?
So I don't think the
No, it
20%
doesn't
rule
apply
applies
to
for lot
lot
coverage.
Or to
Right, it couldn't become a
lot
special permit.
coverage.
We had that conversation a month ago.
It's only to the dimensional requirements of setbacks. Yeah. That would make this a lot easier if it were.
Hearing still open?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, on the third page of my, where I presented to you at the beginning of the meeting, while it wasn't directly germane to what we were talking about, if the board, and this is an example where you begin to come into challenging situations, that 20%, under the 195-9B, where you can do a 20% reduction, and it can be a special permit, that's only currently for setbacks. That provision can be expanded
Should be lot area
to
and
increase,
FAR.
to grant a 20% increase to
That was item
FAR.
4 at the end of it there.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if mathematically the 20% would achieve the compliance with this particular issue. But
But it would
that's,
improve it.
yes, yeah, so those are, that, as the board begins to be challenged with some of these particular situations that the Attorney Howes was mentioning, particularly with the inconsistencies between the zoning map being RC and RB and all of our undersized lots, increasingly, the board is going to begin to see these variances that don't fall in under pre-existing nonconformity that can be handled via a special permit. So we may want to begin to consider, and again, with the board's direction, we could likely piggyback that on what we talked about earlier
the
and
lot
expand 195-9B, existing special permits, increase by 20% to cover lot area and FAR.
I think we can definitely have that discussion. It doesn't help us in this case, but it would be positive.
I don't believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but is the 20% a magic number, or it could be 25%?
In fact, in his email, he does suggest that
My-
20% is an object, but we could look at removing it entirely and doing it on a case-by-case. That
Within the
was the end of
discretion of
his
the board.
paragraph there.
That's where I was heading.
I think
Just
we
to close
could
the loop on
consider
that,
that.
the timeframe for that would be, presumably, the planning board could advertise a public hearing likely in January for an April town meeting. Council, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's advertised in January, what's the status of when people can initially apply and proceed at their own risk?
It would be once the town meeting approves it.
Okay, so between January and April, no one can even apply?
Correct.
Okay, so the soonest we'd be able to find a regulatory.
Till the
resolution.
Commonwealth approves the
Would be
change, I think, right?
Well, it actually relates to the date of the town meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Which we've learned about recently.
Yes.
We're conferring with the client, because if this approach is taken, then I want to find out if we can perhaps continue it till that town meeting vote takes place. It solves that issue for you. But I don't want to delay something unnecessarily if the board is of the opinion that it satisfies or that they feel comfortable with voting to approve it. We would just not be waiting the 4 or 5 months.
I mean, maybe we could consider that part of our approval of the variance.
think that's a
Could we
smart
put that
idea.
into the writing that?
I don't think that.
Either yay or
No,
nay.
we're not
Okay.
doing that, Aaron. No.
Well, I mean, if that's the
Yes.
intention.
Mr. Chairman, can I just take one moment?
Yes, we'll give you a moment, sir. Take your time.
Want to have a little straw poll or anything?
If people are comfortable with that, I would be in favor of this application as presented, personally. I don't know if people are comfortable with a straw poll.
I'm
not.
I'm
What, a
not.
straw poll?
Yeah,
You're not in favor of the straw poll or not in?
no, I'm not in favor of this.
Okay. I didn't know, when you said I'm not, I didn't know what you meant.
No,
I would think that we should continue it, in my opinion.
I think that's going to be the best avenue for
Until,
success for them.
until April.
Well, we can continue it month by month and see if things change. I mean, I can't see how they can reduce the footprint dramatically
Well, if they go
to get where they're
over
going.
here, I mean, that's another option.
Well, 'cause they're
Could they
already
like
at
come back and,
14%, so they can't.
if we continue it to April, could they come back earlier? If
They
they
come
wanted
back every
to?
month.
We could continue it month by
Oh,
month
month by
without,
month.
you know, it's just a
Special vote,
continuance,
FAR,
it's a
right?
Okay.
2-minute process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely can do that. You can continue it to next month, and then next month continue it again to the following
And we'll just
month.
have Becky make sure she gets the permission for it would become 100 days, right, or the 90 days?
It's 100 days on the variance.
It's 100 days for the variance and 90 days for a special permit, just to make it a challenge.
If the board was inclined that if we were to reach the 18%, which is the 20% bump allowance that you could do as a special permit, and it was
Can't do
inclined
that,
to
yeah.
get to 18%, we could continue this and submit a revised plan that meets the 18%. And then it would be a special permit approach.
I don't believe that's something we are able to do at this point, right?
Well, we can
Say
continue it.
You can continue it, but I'm just saying,
It essentially would be a straw poll. Are you conceptually in favor of them coming back and showing something that theoretically would meet whatever this new particular bylaw is going to allow?
If they would come back in January with
Yeah.
something that's at 17.99%, what could we do with that? Because we still have to wait until
You would
April
still
when it
have to wait
becomes
until after
special.
town meeting, yes.
At least they know where they stand and could, you know.
So if they're gonna have to wait until April either way, they might as well stick with.
no, we're suggesting it, we may wind up limiting it to 18% or 17.99
Yeah, but that
to
was
satisfy the engineer.
Or, I mean, again, this hasn't even been proposed yet. It hasn't gone to the planning board yet. It could be that number would be larger than the 20% because you're dealing with sort of different numbers and percentages.
That's true.
So,
A sliding scale at this point.
I honestly think it's an uphill road for you at this point. So I'd
Let's
suggest the
continue
continuance, and during that time, perhaps Evan can work at coordinating between planning board and perhaps our board and decide what would we like to see that number be, so that things like this can be approved.
Or maybe no number, as I
We've
suggest.
achieved the dimensional requirement, which in my mind is very important to controlling the McMansion per se. The lot area, I mean, I can tell you how many homes, you can't even drive a car next to the house, and they're fine, they're existing, they do what they do, so.
So we'll make a formal request to continue to
We're
January.
gonna
And
do it
give
on
an
a
extension of the 100-day
month-by-month
period.
basis.
We will give an extension on the record for 60 days plus from that date.
Okay, our next hearing is January 5th. So at this point, the public hearing is open, and we will continue this until January 5th, with a continuance if necessary after that fact. But hopefully by then we have some, I know the holidays are going to make it a challenge.
Thank
We'll
you
have
for your
some
time.
clarity on where we're going to go with it, and it may be that you can let it ride, depending on what the planning board's thoughts are, and we
Right.
can.
We'll be in touch
Begin to
with
formulate a
the
plan.
town council and Jose and Evan. Thank you all very much for your time spent struggling with this. I appreciate it on behalf of my client and myself. Thank you.
Do we need to make a motion?
Yes, can I get a motion to continue the hearing until January 5th?
Make a motion to continue until January 5th.
Charlie?
11 Rainbow Ave.
Second by Steve.
Sure. Favor?
All in favor? Getting there, getting there. Yeah, you got the date.
At least like.
Thank you all.
Thank you. You're on my clock this time.
Okay. Calm down.
All right. Back to November 3rd. Inexplicably.
My thing was broken.
I'm not seeing my agenda.
Yeah, I already set it up for the next plot plan. Here's the-
This is November 3rd, I think. It's the first, I'm sorry. Okay. The next hearing is a continuation of 16 Freeman Road. Jeff Ansell. He has sent a letter asking for a continuance. To whom it may concern, I am formally asking the board to continue my hearing once more, as I am still working on with an architect to come up with alternative options. Thank you, Jeff Hansel. I have a motion to continue the public hearing till January 5th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing without prejudice till our next meeting on January 5th for 16 Freeman Road.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Aaron, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Are we approaching any limits with that one?
No, he has submitted a payment extension through the end of January.
So we have the letter that we talked about
Letter on
last month.
file.
Yes.
Now we're at 150.
Our next hearing is also a continuation, 150 to 152 Dalton Road. Luc Fougere, DBA Fougere Landscaping Incorporated, and 150, 152 Dalton Road LLC. The applicant requests an amendment to the 1955 variance, or in the alternative, a special permit to modify an existing non-conforming use for continuation of a current mixed use as a residential dwelling and a landscaping company. This property consists of approximately 1.66 acres located in the residential B district. Have someone here this evening representing 150, 152? They stepped outside, is that what you said?
Did I miss it? Did you do 12 Sylvan Ave?
Yeah.
We did that first.
The first one? Oh.
You know, why did we do that first? I thought that was funny.
Ryan read it wrong.
Oh. I was like,
I
why is
I
this
had
all over
November
the place?
1st. I bounced
It went
around.
well with how we
I
opened.
like to mix it up a little. You know,
Just keeping us
same
on our-
old thing
keeping us on our
doesn't work for me
toes.
always.
We do have letters for this.
We do.
Where's Pam? She's not nobody. There she is.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Just a curiosity question, will you have my presentation materials, or should I just be walking through them?
I can bring them up.
You can, okay. I probably don't need them yet, but if you can go ahead and do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. For the record, I'm Pam Brown, an attorney with Brown & Brown PC in Bedford. I'm both a planner and an attorney that works primarily in land use and zoning issues. With me tonight is my client, Luc Fougere, and Phil Iliopoulos, who will also be assisting with the presentation. We have a lot of material here. I'm going to do my best to sort of summarize why we're here and what we think we'd like to see for relief, as well as walking through some of the history of the property, the use of the property, which is primarily why we're here. In deference to the building inspector, who had requested that, by letter, he indicated that there were a number of prior non-conforming uses of the property, but then proceeded to say that we needed to file for an amendment to a 1955 variance. I believe that that request came from a request for an enforcement from Mr. Henry Dane, Attorney Henry Dane, on behalf of his client, Mr. Thatcher. But again, there's quite a bit of history of the use of this property. So in deference to the building inspector, we have filed a request for a couple things. One was to amend the 1955 variance, which was to allow retail use at this property, which expanded upon the commercial greenhouses that were presently located probably decades prior to that time. In addition, with a presumption that this is a prior non-conforming use of the property, that the greenhouses, the commercial use of the property has sort of morphed over time, there is the opportunity to consider whether there has been an intensification or a modification of that prior non-conforming use. And finally, when you look at that special permit consideration, we think it actually may be within the board's authority to actually make a finding that if you believe that this is a prior nonconforming use, that Mr. Fougere's use of the property for the past 4 years, and as he intends to continue it, is in fact actually not an intensification or modification of at least the most prior 30 years of use of the property as a landscaping yard. So with that, we actually believe that that latter point could be done by finding. So historically, I think you probably all know the property, so if you can actually back up one page, I'm going to get to that bottom of that. So I think it's the second page in just a minute. Historically, the mixed use of the property has been probably since the early 1900s. It's always appeared to have been an owner or occupant of the house operating whatever business was on the property. The lot itself is about 4 times the size of other lots in the neighborhood, the other residential lots. The use, the commercial use of the property is entirely behind the home, and from the streetscape, you'd never know what was there. It's accessed by a driveway along the side to the rear of the property. Luke has, I think, since he's been there over these past 4 years, met with neighbors and worked on, buffers or fences as they mutually agreed. The back corner is heavily landscaped and has a berm, and that actually happens to be Mr. Thatcher's property. It's probably the most buffered of all. They overlap by about 30 to 40 feet. Prior to Fougere's purchase in 2018, Luke performed significant due diligence. And that wasn't just, hey, am I okay? The building inspector actually required quite a bit of documentation, which was provided, file research, ultimately resulting in a opinion of building inspector Shanahan at the time, indicating that the property, in fact, was a prior nonconforming use that could continue. Luke was situated elsewhere and doing fine, but this was the perfect property for him. He wanted to be in Chelmsford with his family, to raise his children here, and to be a part of the community. It appears that the commercial greenhouses that were allowed back in the 50s may have become non-conforming by about 1976, which again created a non-conforming use because those uses, the nursery and the greenhouse uses, are no longer showed up in the bylaw after 1996. By 1984, when the original 1950s owner was ready to move on, Environmental Gardens came in and they also did some due diligence. They moved in and operated a use much more similar to what Luke is doing today. And they were there from 1984 until 1994. That use continued again until 2018 by Anthony's Gardens, who was there from 1994 until 2018, at which point the Fougeres purchased the property. Now, I did want to jump to the bottom of the page here just to talk a minute. I am a planner, so I look at these things. From a community impact perspective, the present use, I should note actually that the Chelmsford assessors have taxed this property as mixed use for as long as I could go back. So it's not taxed as a residential property. We understand it's a residential zone. That's not the question here. The streetscape, as I mentioned, it maintains its appearance as a single-family home. The storage of all the landscaping materials is at the rear of the property. There's limited work performed on site. Luke does keep his vehicles there, and he keeps materials there, which his limited number of employees and he and his wife, who also work in the company, come to the site. They load their trucks or trailers and go off-site to perform their landscaping jobs. Vehicle circulation is in a loop, which avoids, once you're into the property, there's no backing onto I think for the Fougere family, the property really satisfied their goal to live and operate their business from home. Generally, through our prior hearings with the planning board on this, there was a lot of neighborhood support. Just about all of the immediate abutters that actually touching the property supported both Luke and his continued use. We just today had a few more letters coming in or emails coming in support. So I think at this point, if you would be kind enough to sort of scroll down, I did want to just do a little bit of overview to some of the graphics.
Graphics.
I do have I've kind of outlined I don't want to bore you with the blow by blow. If it comes up in questions, we can go back to the year by year, but I did provide a detailed summary in my application materials. This is just an old 1965 GIS map, USGS map, little difficult to see, but you can actually see that in 65, which we knew, the greenhouses existed. There were greenhouses, storage sheds, workshops, and so forth. The plan, there's a lot of material in here, but if you can, yes, if you'll stop there, please. Sure. These are just some pages from Environmental Gardens. We could do the same for Luke to compare, but, and we can just scroll through these, but just to give you a snapshot of the work that Environmental Gardens was doing, and we have spoken with the owner of Environmental Gardens, and all of this material was also stored on site. We call this hardscape, landscaping and hardscaping. So there's stone, there's patios, there's walls, and so forth. And then Bertolacini, Anthony's Gardens, as I mentioned, was there for 24 years. I think many of you are probably familiar with Anthony's operation. Again, very similar. We just had some information to help support that. That particular one, I think, is 2004.
Let me scroll down.
So I've also provided several of the town, really from the town GIS, the historical aerial photos indicating use of the property. Again, nothing new. The extent of use of the rear of the property and the location of many sheds and greenhouses and so forth. A couple of the greenhouses were removed by Luke in the idea of cleaning up. He also was looking to expand his backyard, the residential portion of the backyard, into this area. If I go to the next slide, then we're at 2011, 2012, I think is, so this is when Anthony's Garden was in operation. Similar, we believe more intense in terms of operational activity, what was going on there day to day, and so forth. And then, again, if you scroll again down to the next aerial photo, this is, I believe, 2021, which is the time in which, oh, that was 2014. Okay, so 2014 would have been Anthony's, and then 2021 is when Fougere came in. There we go. So you can see the pool, and that's the area that Luke would like to expand the residential dock. You see the rear left of or the top of the screen to the left. That area is the most heavily wooded, just to point out, because I know they'll be speaking, is Mr. Thatcher's house off the corner there. So that overlap is 30 or 40 feet to the rear. But especially in the summer months, it's the most probably vegetated of all. We have attempted to understand what Mr. Thatcher's issues are. I have had offered to try to present some potential conditions that might satisfy him, but to date, I've been really unable to do that because they won't explain other than just say no. They haven't said we have trouble with noise, or we have trouble with views, or any of the typical things that we could try to mitigate. We've continued to ask. We continue to be open to having a sit-down meeting to try to understand really what any neighbor concerns might be. But as I mentioned, I I have another map probably, but with all of the immediate abutters have submitted letters of support. I would like to, do you want to say anything at this point, or do we ask questions? I think maybe see if the board has any questions at this point, I can pause, and if not, we can go on to a little more testimony.
How many vehicles are stored on the site?
That's a you question.
6 to 8 at any given time.
Including your equipment?
I don't.
I just want to be clear, so.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and there's equipment as well, but those are not registered vehicles.
What are those vehicles? Are they like all pickup trucks or larger or?
Mostly pickup trucks. Mostly pickup trucks. There's 5 pickups. There's 3 small dump trucks that are all under CDL. That's the gist, other than my wife and I's SUVs.
What's the rating of the small dump, like the load capacity of the small dump trucks?
The largest one we have, the GVWR, is 22,000 pounds. 26,001 would be CDL and up.
So you could drive it.
No commercial driver's license required.
Besides the vehicles, what do you have for like trailers or other things that are stored on site?
Of course.
How does that compare to what was in the past from your knowledge?
So in the past, it depends on who we're talking about, but we
Let's say the
have-
previous person
Sure.
right before you.
Sure.
Environmental
The previous
gardens.
person before us had CDL vehicles, much larger, much louder, older. We have trailers. Most of the time they sit. As soon as a machine goes to a site, they come home and they just sit there. They don't do much all the time. But we have 2 open trailers and we have 2 enclosed trailers.
Any excavators or anything like that on the site, or?
Yep, we have a mini excavator, which is under 9,000 pounds. We have 2 skid steers that are under 10,000 pounds. We have a small-bodied loader, which is just a wheeled machine with a bucket. The prior owners had backhoes and larger excavators, and so we're actually a smaller footprint when it comes to truck machine-wise in size.
How often are those machines running like on a daily basis, the majority of the?
No, it's basically first thing when we load up, and then occasionally when we come back if we need a little bit more material, say gravel or soil. And then the end of the day, not a heck of a lot of activity besides coming home and kind of unloading and calling it a day.
What are the operating hours of the business?
Within 7 to 5.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about that 1955 variance. So I just assume that was never recorded? But don't you have 1 year to record it?
So, it's actually, it doesn't read as a variance, in my opinion. It reads as a letter allowing something. So that in itself has been a question for me. I don't know that I've actually looked to see if it's recorded, but I don't have a recorded copy. So the letter doesn't say variance. The request wasn't for a variance. The request, I mean, again, it's 1955. We have a little bit more formality today. However, if you look at the request, it was just, I want to have a little retail shop in the front of the greenhouse. And the board voted to allow that in variance with the bylaw. So I guess on one hand, you could argue it was a variance, but it's not written that way. So I would have to dig a lot further. I hadn't been able, I wasn't finding really any more documentation of the requested relief other than very simple letters and a very simple decision.
Okay. And a use variance before 1976 was obviously allowed. So the time period, do you have to renew that how often?
A variance runs with the land.
That's what I thought.
Forever, yes. Unlike a special permit that might, but could be restricted. a variance, once issued, runs with the land.
Okay, so if they had a variance before 1976, it should still be in effect.
But that's for the retail. I think the greenhouses became non-conforming uses that kind of, the whole commercial greenhouse operation morphed into your nursery, into the landscaping, which is pretty common. My family actually owned a wholesale nursery in the turn of the century, the last century, in Bedford. Operated the Shady Hill Nursery right along the railroad tracks by my great-grandparents. And, it's now New England Nurseries, which you may know, but it's the same kind of thing. It kind of morphs into modernizing times and needs. I don't think, in 1950, we didn't have many people that weren't mowing their own lawns and weren't doing their own planting shrubs and so forth, patios and all of that. It's just, it's a sign of the times.
I guess I'm confused why you don't feel that's a variance per se.
It's just
in
vague.
variance
I'm-
to the zoning laws. It was voted on by the Board of Appeals.
Right.
For the,
Yep.
what did they call it in this? A retail store for the sale of plants and related merchandise.
Yeah, invariance. So, like I said, it's a little vague.
And I don't think there's any time limit to record that. I think you could record that
Well,
now.
I don't think the one-year provision was in the statute in
I
1955.
wasn't aware of it. I thought you could just go record it now if you chose to. I don't know why you couldn't. Mr. Havard, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
I don't know if the recording requirement was in place in 1955.
That would be a factor as
There is
well.
case law that has allowed the recordation of variances well after the one-year period, as long as use had commenced pursuant to that variance within the one-year period.
I don't think that's in question at this point.
Right. So I think, I don't see that as being an issue in this matter. If it hasn't been recorded, I think it still could be.
And the reason I ask, I'm looking at the summary of the argument presented by Dane Brady. Not sure who the attorney is here. But in his summary, he argues that there is no variance to appeal, which I don't know where we stand on that.
I don't think I understand your question. There's no variance to.
Item 4 in his memorandum of opposition says that the 1955 variance, which the applicant wishes the board to amend, has never been recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and therefore there is no currently valid variance for the board to amend. I mean, that's his argument, and I just don't know where we stand with that. It's a curious position, but I think if you can record it, you probably should. And then we would have a variance to amend if that is in fact a factor, which I understand his point. I don't know if a variance becomes, upon recording, more valid, if that's the correct terminology.
I don't think it becomes more valid. It's a requirement of the statute now that a variance be recorded within 1 year. However, the courts have interpreted that requirement really that it be exercised within 1 year.
Which we believe it was. That's not in question here.
Correct. So there have been decisions that have allowed for recordation after the 1 year period has expired. This is obviously far after. I think if the board is going to view this as that variance not being valid, I think it actually helps the applicant, because then you are actually operating under the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 7, which has to do with construction pursuant to the issuance of a invalidly issued building permit. And that statute was actually fairly recently changed to allow uses that commence essentially illegally, in contravention to the bylaws without zoning relief. It allows those to be treated as pre-existing non-conforming uses.
The use itself.
Correct. Whereas variances do not benefit from that status. So something that was allowed pursuant to the issuance of a variance wasn't technically legally commenced and cannot be treated as a pre-existing non-conforming use or structure.
But if it wasn't required to file the variance at the time, then probably every variance issued at the time wasn't filed, right?
Well, it's not even required today. It's
Yeah.
if you want to.
So I think that's
No, it
kind of.
is a
It's a
requirement
deed.
of the statute today.
But it wasn't
There
at the
But
time.
there is some leeway in terms of that 1-year period, as long as you have changed your position in reliance upon the issuance of the variance.
But it doesn't sound like that doesn't sound like an avenue that we could take.
It would require certainly a lot more factual support.
It sounds like a stretch to me.
And the request here tonight is to amend that variance. That's why we're
Well, I
here.
think we have multiple requests for relief. The applicant believes that this can be treated as a pre-existing non-conforming use. I think as a use that was actually initially authorized through the issuance of a variance, I'm not 100% with them on that. I think that the modification of the variance would be the more appropriate way to go. Because, again, if the use that originally was commenced there was through a variance, then it doesn't get to be treated as a pre-existing non-conforming use.
If I could just interject there, I interpret the use of the property as being twofold. So the greenhouses were there at the time of the variance, and the variance was to allow the retail portion. So we've got a couple things going on, so that it was I forget the dimensions, 20-foot square or something, 16 by 20 square foot, or foot structure at the front of the greenhouses, which.
26 by 16
Thank
was
you.
what was allowed.
Yeah, so the variance was to allow the retail use when the greenhouses were already there operating. But the greenhouses at some point became non-conforming because they no longer were on the books.
They lifted those out of the agricultural allowance. Holy cow.
In 1956, the zoning bylaw actually permitted greenhouses and nurseries in the residential district.
Permitted them.
Yes, by right. So when
Then
that
that went
bylaw
away.
changed, then that use became non-conforming, and
But they would be grandfathered even though the law
Correct.
changed. But the greenhouses are gone now.
most of them.
So that would raise a separate question as to whether or not the
You need a
original
list of
use
questions, yeah.
and what it's morphed into is sort of a natural.
Progression.
Yeah, so it would be something that was an iterative change over time that is still sort of within the nature and character of the original use.
I'm still struggling on what we're going to decide. I know that doesn't sound like it's very clear, but what are you asking for? Relief,
You know what I
of
would love you
course.
to do is to make a finding, which you often do in your deliberations. You make findings and then you might vote on a special permit. But sometimes you only need to make a finding. And you probably do that when you have some nonconformities. The building inspector likely does it when he makes a determination that something isn't intensifying the nonconformity. So an addition or something that's not intensifying the nonconformity, he might do it. But if it comes to the board because it's not clear to the building inspector, you might make a finding that it's not an intensification. And ultimately here, it appears we've had a non-conforming use that has morphed over time. But my position is that the Fougères' use of the property, as it has been for 4 years, and as proposed, is not an intensification of the use of the property over the last 38 years, at a minimum. And there's some equity to be said here. And if that was the case, the board would simply vote to make that finding, and we wouldn't be discussing variances or special permits.
Just a finding that it had not morphed in use.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I call it the word on the street, or the knowledge on the street of, what people that have been in town a long time have known of this property. I think everyone we've talked to says that property's been in that use forever. Forever's a long term, obviously, or long time, but here, I think if we can feel comfortable that the use from the greenhouse nursery with a retail shop has become the modern version of a nursery with a, with a hardscape business operation, home base, if you will, because most of the work is not done on site, it's done at clients' houses. Then I think it's fair for the board to make the determination via finding, really a finding of fact, that the fougere use is not an intensification over the prior non-conforming use. And that's what the statute says, is that the existing or proposed non-conforming use is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, and it's not, or actually that it's not an intensification of the prior non-conforming use. And if you never hit the intensification standard, no permit is actually required. I know, it's confusing.
I understand what you're saying. I think we are really at a disadvantage to understand what did happen, what's happening now. And, I've gone by that property forever, and I've never even seen, honestly, signs of life. Where the work occurs is in the rear, which may affect the abutters far more than someone passing on Dalton or Stedman. I just don't, it doesn't appear that there's a lot of work going there. I do understand how the hardscaping is something where you may take materials to it, load a truck, and go to the job and do that. So it's just a challenge to understand how we can determine, has this intensified? I mean, my personal opinion, I've never seen any, I know what's back there, but it's never been, a very busy property.
I've got a question for.
If there are people in the back who would like to talk, you're going to get your opportunity, don't you worry. So we'll open it up to the public after we try to get a handle on it. It's obviously been a long time, and it's concerning to many. We're going to pay attention to that.
Question for the owner. In between, you took ownership of the property in 2018?
Correct.
So if we go back to from 2019 to now, so with like a year after you took ownership, have you acquired more equipment? Like, have things changed in the last 3 years of your ownership at that site?
Yes, we've actually gotten smaller. I had a lot more employees when I first moved there.
Okay, so in regards to employees, it has reduced.
Correct.
With regards to materials stored on site, whether that's the raw stone and whatever else, or trailers, excavators, vehicles, has that maintained or increased or decreased?
In comparison to the prior use before us, no.
But in comparison to what you were doing in 2019 to now in 2022, has it stayed level? Or?
We've moved things around and organized so that everything has its place. But no, we haven't intensified my use.
So what was on the property in 2019 is a fair one-to-one representation of what was on the property today in 2022?
Give and take, yes. Like, there would be much more materials, more mulch, more loam, more soil then than there is now. And instead, we have, like a pile of boulders or
Okay.
a pile of fill in its place.
But if we limited the question to equipment that you own, is it approximately, you have?
Equipment that I own is not increased at all. When we've every time we've purchased a vehicle and or a piece of equipment, we've sold one in its place.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, like before we moved in 2016, we had 15 to 20 employees, 150 maintenance accounts. We dropped that. And then we moved, and we got even smaller because of where we're located. I mean, I believe in love thy neighbor and respect the neighbor. If everybody hates us there, then what's the point in being there? I don't want to disturb anyone. I just want to, continue to follow my dream. I mean, I started this from scratch. So when we found this opportunity, as Pam was saying earlier, we were perfectly situated. We had a home in Billerica, we had a shop in Billerica, and everything was fine. And we stumbled across this property last minute because of Anthony's owner's death, unfortunately. Last minute it came available. And when we did all our due diligence, we were like, wow, I mean, can you believe it? We get to make coffee and walk out back and go to work. I mean, that barely exists anymore. So the only reason that we are there, and no, we are not intensified in comparison to the last, especially material-wise, I mean, they were a disaster. There was a lot of cleanup involved first. That's why I asked from when we moved in till now. I mean, we got rid of so much clutter. But no, I don't mean to stutter here, but it's just, it's hard to imagine that somebody would want to shut something down that I've spent my entire life trying to build, and we're right there. You know, if we received complaints, we would have done something about it. But I don't know, it's disheartening, I guess is what I'm getting at. I know that doesn't matter, but I just want to continue doing what we're doing and making everybody happy, because this is what my family thrives and lives off of. Like, when we moved, we had another kid because we were like, wow, this place is amazing. You know, this is exactly what we've worked towards. So I know I'm getting off topic. I apologize. I'm getting emotional, but I don't want to intensify. I don't feel that I have. I feel I've gotten much more organized, so things might look bigger because everything was just thrown all over the place when we first moved in. But I just want to make people happy and go to work. I want to get back to my kids. Like tonight, both of my kids were really upset that I had to leave again. I wanted to put them to bed. But we just want to operate. We want to operate quietly. If there's a complaint, if somebody has a suggestion, great. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story. Prior to us actually moving in, we started to clean the place up. Mr. Thatcher himself came up to one of my employees and screamed in their face on my property. One of my guys called me and said, this guy says, we've got another thing coming if we think that we're going to continue to operate a business here. I dropped what I was doing. I went to Mr. Thatcher's house. I knocked on the door. I very politely greeted him. I introduced myself. He was very, very disgruntled at the fact that there was a business there. He told me that he wishes he bought the property so that he could have turned it back into a residential, but it never was. It was always a residential with a mixed-use commercial. I asked him what could I do to make him happy. 6-foot fence, 8-foot fence, trees, buffers. Is there anything I can do to make you happy? And he told me to pound sand. And since then, he has had a beef with us being there. We have not done anything detrimental to harm him in any way. In fact, there is a 20-foot berm of soil there so that he doesn't have to even see us. I just want to go to work, come home, eat dinner, put my kids to bed, and start it over again. That's it, period. So if there's any other complaints, I would love to put them to rest. And I'm way off topic, sorry. So I'm going to sit unless you have another question.
Are there any further questions from the board or some clarification?
Well, that's it for now.
I will read the letters in that I've received.
These 2 in opposition and 3 in favor.
Say it again.
2, this one, waiver. This is opposition. This was received right before the meeting was continued.
So has it been read in
That
yet?
has
No,
not been
okay.
read.
Okay. This email is from Ed Hogan. I just wanted to say here that Luc Fougere and family have been wonderful neighbors from the minute they moved in. Their property abuts ours at 44 Stedman Street, and we would like to express our support for any plans Luc is proposing. He always keeps us fully informed. His businesses have never had any negative impact on the neighborhood. Fougere Landscaping is a plus for Chelmsford. Sincerely, Ed Hogan. I have a letter from Cynthia and William Gist, 156 Dalton Road. I've learned that due to the complaint of one person, you are considering moving the business rights currently held by Fougere Landscaping. I am unable to be there tonight, but would like to state that I consider this to be unfair, unkind, and unnecessary. They bought the property in good faith with the permission of the previous commissioner, planning to raise their family and run their business in a good neighborhood. No one complained at that time. They have been good neighbors, and as I live within 20 feet of the driveway, our property abuts the entire first half of the side border. I can verify that business-wise, they've done nothing but improve the property while causing no detriment to ours. Their employees are polite and considerate, and the family itself is friendly, helpful, and is bent over backwards, making sure they do nothing that we might have a problem with. If we have to lose a neighbor, I'd far prefer it to be your complainant. Sincerely, Cynthia and William Gist, 156 Dalton Road. I'm just reading that. I apologize if anyone is offended.
Is that the person to the right?
156 was the address.
To the right, if you're looking at this from the street, yeah.
I have one from Andrew Kelly, to whom it may concern. My name is Andrew Kelly, owner of the residence and property at 42 Stedman Street in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I write this letter to reiterate my support for the Fougere family business at 152 Dalton, wherein that property abuts my own. The Fougere's business at this address had no negative effect on our property or upon the neighborhood in general. All efforts made on their part have only improved the area. If you have any questions or concerns or clarifications are needed, I can be reached at, thank you, Andrew Kelly. The letter was received October 5th. Dear Mr. Reedy and members of the board, as abutters to the Fougere Landscaping and residents of the Westlands for 44 years, we are commenting on the application for an amendment to the 1955 variance or the alternative, a special permit to modify an existing non-conforming use, a continuation of the current mixed use as a residential dwelling and a landscaping company. Concern has been expressed in the Westlands neighborhood that this application does not take into consideration the existing issues in the area, such as increased heavy truck traffic and noise. While on Stedman Street endure both traffic and noise from trucks, neighbors on Dalton Road, just off Stedman Street, we have indicated that currently the Fougere is not the quiet neighbor he professes to be. Since Fougere has two business certificates, one for Fougere Landscaping and Plowing, and another for Fougere Supply Incorporated, and because the information from Fougere has been scant regarding future site uses, it is difficult to know how his companies will operate. Will a supply company sell only to retail? According to a definition of retail, retail is a sale of goods, services to consumers. In contrast to wholesaling, which is the sale to business or institutional customers, this is obviously important due to the potential increase in truck traffic from the wholesale delivery to Fougere and the subsequent sale and delivery to other contractors. Not having this information should raise the necessity of an environmental impact statement and a traffic study. Chelmsford no longer permits use variances. However, the board does have the authority to amend a prior use variance. Alternatively, a 1955 permit could be interpreted to have permitted the expansion of a non-conforming use if the greenhouse is located at 152 Dalton were deemed pre-existing non-conforming uses. According to Brown & Brown, in either case, it appears that several occupants of the property since 1955 have altered, modified, or intensified the use of the land. However, we concede that the uses have morphed since 1955. Our concern is the fact that the business has morphed quietly from a small garden shop to a large landscaping business to a business that currently includes snow plowing and a new landscape supply company. A harbinger of wholesale landscaping supplies, since most of the morphing has been illegal, non-conforming uses that would be facilitated by the addition of a large barn, which, for the record, was denied. Brown & Brown has asked the Zoning Board of Appeals for relief from Mr. Fougere. Mr. Reedy and members of the board, we are asking the board for relief for our Westlands community. Our neighborhood has endured significant negative impacts on the quality of life and the value of our property due to the expanding businesses just across the Lowell line operating beyond the oversight of Chelmsford government. We do not want to prevent Mr. Fougere from earning his livelihood. Rather than continue the expansion of what was a small neighborhood garden flower shop, we would prefer to see Fougere Landscaping continue as a neighborhood landscaping business only. Therefore, we ask you not to amend a prior use variance, nor to interpret the 1955 permit to have permitted the expansion of a non-conforming use. While personal and emotional comments have been made, we have tried to present our position objectively. Sincerely, Jack and Judith Luskin, 34 Stedman Street. Those are the letters I have.
Is that what you have highlighted there, 34?
No, I'm about to highlight. I couldn't remember the number.
34.
This is corner lot.
That's on the corner.
Yep. And I'll zoom out. This is the.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the board, I think I'll open this up to the audience for questions or comment. I ask you queue up behind the podium, give us your name and address, and speak as you would.
while you're doing that, I just wanted to hand out, this is the 1977 plan that actually has the size of the greenhouses. It's not a little small garden, there's about 9,000 square feet of greenhouse and other structures.
Okay.
That were 1977. I apologize, I forgot to mention that earlier.
Thank you.
Allow this to file.
Mr. Chairman, may I briefly speak?
You can, after that gentleman, you can queue up as the rest would.
Sorry, that's why I dropped right in front of them.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Henry Dane, and I'm here for the abutter, Mr. Thatcher, as I was last time we convened. First of all, I think we have two issues here. One is the...
Can I just interrupt? Are you his attorney?
I'm his attorney, yes.
Okay, just
And
understand.
I was the author of that letter that you read
Just
from
read it.
about the recording the variance.
Thank you.
So I'm Dane of Dane, Brady, and Hayden.
I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
So I think we've dealt with two issues. One is the variance issue, and the other is the prior existing non-conforming use issue. The application before you was framed in terms of the request of the building inspector saying that an amendment to the 1955 variance was required for Fougere to continue his business on the site. And that was essentially what the application was. And then the request with regard to the non-conforming prior use was really not referenced except in the application, except to say, oh, and whatever other permits might be necessary. And I think that there is no specific request in the application or even reference to a permit for a prior, to change, alter, or extend a prior existing non-conforming use. And there's no reference to the section 195(8), which is the section of the bylaw under which such a special permit would be issued. I was taken aback by the statement that Ms. Brown made that, that 1955 document was not a variance, because that's what the application that was made depended on, which was the fact that there was a variance from 1955 that could be amended. So the outline of my basic argument on that point is laid out right on the first page of my memo, which says that use variances are not permitted under the Town of Chelmsford zoning bylaw. Under Chapter 40A, Section 10, unless otherwise permitted by the bylaw, no use not otherwise permitted in the district can be authorized by a variance. The third point is that the exception contained in 40A Section 10 for the extension of time-limited variances granted in 1976 applies only to the extension of the time and not to the extension of the scope of the activity permitted. And the 1955 variance, which the applicant wishes the board to amend, has never been recorded at the Registry of Deeds and therefore is not currently a valid variance for the board to amend. And even if the board had the authority to amend the 1955 variance, such amendment would be totally discretionary, and the application before the board does not address the criteria that must be considered in granting a variance. The Section 10 variance is about factors uniquely affecting the property and its configuration and so on and so on. So I don't think legally, if that 1955 document was a variance, I don't think you have the statutory authority to make any changes or to extend it, as the language says, because the only extension you can make under the statute is to extend its time if it was a variance that was originally limited for a certain period. So that brings us to the other issue, which is the prior existing nonconforming use. The prior existing nonconforming use is not based on what happened there in 2010 or 2000 or 1990 or 1980 or 1970. The use could have been continued for 30 or 40 years on that location. The issue is not how long, the issue is whether it commenced before the adoption of the zoning bylaw that made that a residential district. And so if the use was not commenced prior to it being put in a residential zone, it's not nonconforming. It's not a prior existing nonconforming use no matter how long it's been there, as long as it wasn't there prior to the adoption of the bylaw that prohibited that use. So it's clearly we didn't put up the pictures, I think, that we submitted with the application, but the aerial photographs, sorry, then you've seen versions of these photographs. It's obviously a commercial operation there. It's a fairly intense operation. And there was when they applied for the special permit from the planning board for the 40 by the 60 by 55 large commercial building on the site, which the planning board denied, it was perfectly clear that they were conducting a serious business operation there, which is not permitted under the bylaw. And so it's one thing to expand or allow the extension of a prior existing nonconforming use. It is an entirely different thing to legitimize a use that has been in violation of the zoning bylaw for maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years. And that is essentially what the applicant is asking you to do. They're asking you, because that use has been there for a long time, but not prior to the adoption of the residential district. And there is no concrete evidence, not a single fact I heard tonight about what the date was that the residential district was adopted in that particular location, or specifically what was happening there prior to that date. And the 1955 variance is as good evidence as you could imagine for showing that obviously even the modest addition of a small retail store required a variance strongly suggests that even that use was not one that was permitted in 1955. And so it is not reasonable to assume that a more intense use than that was present on that site before 1955. So I think that as sympathetic as the case might be, the question is whether or not you have the authority to grant what the applicant has asked you to grant. And I think I've laid out all the legal issues in my memorandum, and I know that if they're not things that have kind of fallen into place for you tonight in my outline of them, there are things that you can review by reading the outline, which is a result of the background research that we've done on this. I think there are probably some people here who've come tonight who will take a different view of the impact on the neighborhood. And I should say this, that one of the criteria, if you should even be thinking about granting a special permit to change or alter a prior existing non-conforming use. And again, I think the permit that they'd really ask for is not for you to change, alter, or extend, but to just endorse and condone what has been going on there. It requires that you make a finding that there be no adverse impact on the neighborhood, and that it is in conformity with the intention and purpose of the zoning bylaw. And it's very difficult, I think, for you to reach the conclusion that operating a substantial commercial operation in a residential district is not consistent with the purpose or intent of the zoning bylaw in determining that this is a residential district. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak this evening? Favor or opposition to this?
Hi. He's a tough act to follow. My name is Gail Landry, and I live at 79 Linwood Street. And if you all will look at the picture up there, my property is the one in the back. So all of the equipment and all of the dirt and all of the stone and everything else is right. I see it all. Anyway, I wrote a letter. As direct abutters to 150, 152 Dalton Road, I offer some additional input. My family has been at this address since 1989. We believe the current usage of the property at issue is to be in violation of the town zoning laws, and that Mr. Fugere was given incorrect information by the town as to the type of business he could operate in a residential neighborhood, a very quiet residential neighborhood. Mr. Fugere is indeed using his property as a contractor's yard. He has vehicles, equipment, stone, soil, and many other supplies stored and maintained on his property. He receives deliveries often. He moves materials around daily. During winter storms, there are plow trucks entering the yard to fill up with road chemicals, which are also stored on the property in a shed. This business is very different from Environmental Gardens or Anthony's Gardens. Both prior occupants utilized much less of the property, had very little in the way of trucks and materials stored on site way in the back. They may have had some parked out front where they came and went on the street, but not out back. And they were surrounded by a lot more greenery. He's taken down a lot of the trees and the bushes around it, especially in the back. Over the years, we've added a berm and trees and a fence so we wouldn't have to look at any items in the yard. Now they're impossible to hide. Materials, dumpsters, trailers, and other items are all stored right up at our property line. This type of activity affects the value and the peaceful enjoyment of our property, and we hope that the town does the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Megan Fenders. I'm at 158 Dalton, so I'm just 2 houses down. We're opposed to this because Anthony's Gardens, we rarely heard them. We hear them on a daily basis. He cut down all the trees that are actually against the GIST property line. If you look at like the older 2014, like some of those that she submitted, you'll see that the trees were still there, but he cut it all down and he did put up a fence, but you have to hear it all. And yes, he operates at 7 a.m., so if you want to sleep in on a Monday through Friday, forget about it. And then it doesn't count, if the snow plowing, if they have to go out at 2 a.m. So we're just opposed to it. I think they've pretty much covered everything.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Luskin. I live at 34 Stedman Street, which is on the corner of Dalton and Stedman. A couple of points that I'd sort of like to make tonight, and one of them, it has to do with the truck traffic. Truck traffic on Stedman Street borders on unbearable. When we moved here a long time ago, 40 some odd years ago, there was almost no truck traffic, and now there's a significant amount of truck traffic, and not just ordinary trucks. We now have these super tankers, which are bigger than 18-wheelers that you've seen driving around for years. And they're going up and down. There's a new logging outfit down at the end of Stedman Street that it's all day, every day. They're bringing logs that are bound together for trucks that are going into undeveloped land. And it's either bringing them to the sites or them bringing them back to the end of Stedman Street. This is ongoing. So, and I know that that's outside the jurisdiction of Chelmsford, and it's difficult to get.
Is it
anything.
germane to?
It is in
John's
terms
here
of the noise, in
years.
terms of the quality of life.
But we're somewhat focused on what is going on at this property. Now, I understand. I hear the trucks, I see them, and it's so much more than it ever was. I don't think that is
Well,
Mr. Fougiere's
So
issue.
to take a point that you made earlier, that you've driven by there and it looks, you don't see anything going on. And it's a point of view, it's a perspective that if I were just driving by, I would probably have also. You know, it's just a house, and there's a fence, and the gate is almost always open, nothing to see inside, so you just drive on by. When you live there, it's a different story. It's not a question of just driving by, it's a question of having to listen to noise at various times during the day. At the last planning board meeting, I had mentioned the fact that I was out in the end of our driveway, and there was an 18-wheeler that was dropping something off, or picking something up, I'm assuming dropping off, at Fougiere's, and it was pulled, it was backing into Fougiere's, it was parked or stopped across Dalton Road, blocking traffic on Dalton Road, and it was interesting to hear Mr. Fougiere say that that's not the case, that or I guess it was his lawyer that said that they don't back into the truck, into the yard. But they do, and I've heard that. The increase in dump trucks, traffic on Dalton Road, not on Stedman Street, is also significant, which is annoying for people that live on Dalton Road and on Stedman Street, north and south of Dalton Road. So there are a number of issues in terms of quality of life that residents, and I've been a resident here for, as I said, like 40 years, and so that bothers us. I do have a question, and maybe the building inspector or whatever, Mr. Ogier said that he put up a 20-foot berm to sort of quiet the noise down, and I had trouble getting a 6-foot fence put in because there are limits as to what you could put there. I just don't understand how you put a 20-foot berm in there, but that's a different thing. So at any rate, the point that I'm trying to make is that there are always extenuating circumstances. I've heard the term due diligence a number of times tonight, and I think that everybody does due diligence. That's not unique to any one person or any one goal, but that there's a quality of life issue, there's a community issue, and those issues go beyond the immediate abutters. And I know that some immediate abutters have been very positive toward the Frochères, but not all. And I know that I've spoken to people who have had lots of issues with the noise levels that occur now that never occurred with Environmental Gardens or Louis Bennett or Anthony. So I would like to say that while I'd like to see Mr. Fauchier earn a living, I don't want to see him do it at the expense of the community. I don't want to see the increase in his level of work and business, which he says hasn't increased, but I find that hard to believe. Once this is approved, if it's approved, then there's no stopping how big he gets. We've seen the fact that these operations in the past have taken place, and they haven't been formally, or they haven't been legal in a sense. So once you set a precedent, it's difficult to go back on that precedent. So I appreciate the fact that you're giving a lot more time to this than was given to previous applications for variances, et cetera. So I do appreciate that, and I thank you for spending the time and putting up with us.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott Davidson, I live at 82 Linwood Street. My wife and I have been there for 25 years. So we're basically not in a butter, but we're right in back, about as close as you can get to being in a butter. So basically right next to the Landry's. So I think one of the common things you may have heard tonight is the people towards the back of his property are the most affected by what happens on that property. And because that's where all of his business takes place. And while I don't understand all the technical details of this variance, one of the things that really caught me was like the question of intensification. And I just want to say that there's definitely been an intensification in the work that's happened since he's taken over the property. I knew Anthony Bertolucci, both personally and as well as did work for me, did work for others, in the neighborhood, and he was a one-man operation. He may have had several vehicles, but again, he was a one-man operation operating one thing at a time, and we were rarely disturbed by what he did on his property. I can't say the same thing now. We hear, the activity that's happening there now. There appears to be a lot more activity, a lot more noise, and I think granting this variance is just going to make it more so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. For the record, my name is Philip Iliopoulos. I'm an attorney here in Chelmsford at 9 North Road. I just want to kind of give the board some background how I got involved. I actually represented Luke when he purchased the property back in 2018. It was up for sale, as he had mentioned, because the previous owner that operated the landscaping business there had passed away. And when he came to see me, I did my own sort of checking in with the town, and the most recent thing I could find in Town Hall was a 1994 determination by Tony Zagzu, the building inspector during that time frame, that the property could legally be operated as a nursery, as a retail site for sale of nursery products, so retail clients coming at the property to purchase things, as well as a landscaping operation. So that was in '94. And as part of, yeah, good, you got that letter. So as part of sort of my recommendation to Luke, I suggested he go talk to the current building inspector, because I didn't know quite what the operation was more recently. I didn't know when the gentleman passed away, whether the operation maybe had ceased for a period of time. So I suggested go talk to Mr. Shanahan at the time to see, whether or not he still was of the same opinion as Mr. Zagzu. And so the request was made, and this was not us doing due diligence. This is the town now doing due diligence. And Mr. Shanahan, the building inspector of the town at the time, did his due diligence, checked the records at Town Hall, took a couple of weeks. And I know this because the purchase of this property was contingent on our confirming that the property's use that Luke intended to continue to make, that was being made before, was going to be legal. And so it actually was delaying the closing a little bit because we were waiting for Mr. Shanahan to get back to us. And he finally did, and he basically said that we can continue that operation by right. And that is what led Luke to go forward and purchase the property. It was that reliance not on our due diligence, not in his due diligence, on the town's determination that this was a by right use. Now, we all, just to kind of address a couple of things, noise has been raised tonight, and I think it's been raised as a problem in that neighborhood, on those busy streets, Dalton Road, Stedman Street. And those are busy streets. That's an extremely busy intersection. Traffic is often backed up there. A lot of truck traffic going down Stedman to those businesses, across the boundary in Lowell. And I think to blame that on Luke and his small, family operation, I think is just not factually correct or fair. I think if you took Luke completely out of that site, you'd still have the traffic, you'd still have the trucks, you'd still have that noise. And I will say, in researching with the town, I'm not aware of the town in the last 4 years seeking any enforcement, having any complaints that required the town to come to Luke to address noise problems. So from my perspective, and I suppose the building inspector could confirm that, I'm not aware of any enforcement actions by the town for Luke as it relates to noise complaints. So maybe those are just coming up as part of this process. But what the board has before them is an applicant who has operated there for 4 years, and at least for 30 years, going back to Tony Zagzu's time, that property's been used for retail, as a nursery, and as a landscaping business for 30 years. And no one's complained, no one's tried to shut it down, no one's sought, a process with the building inspector to say, hey, we got to stop this business. He had presented a building to the planning board, and that's what I guess led to this. There was some opposition to that. The planning board denied it, and now we find ourselves here sort of fighting for his family's, kind of livelihood. So, taking off my lawyer hat and putting on my Chelmsford hat, because I am a Chelmsford resident, like you, I served on boards. We do this work because we care about the town. We want to see the town progress. We want to see the town be healthy, move forward. We work hard to attract good businesses in this town so that we can have paying jobs for our residents. Right out in the hallway here. If you walk out, you probably don't notice it. I noticed it for the first time tonight. There's a whole billboard dedicated to doing business in Chelmsford, right outside this hallway. And what kind of messages are going to send to those of us who are trying to market this town that you can't rely on town hall for a business? When you have a business that wants to come to Chelmsford and the building inspector says it's allowed by right, and you rely on that, and you buy a building and a house and you move your business and you can't rely on that, what kind of message is that going to send to any of us being able to promote this town? I think it would be a terrible, terrible mistake to put someone out of business who relied on town hall to come to Chelmsford. So my feeling is, what I would suggest is you work with town council and you figure out what is the right course to allow this business to operate. Is it a determination that the use is allowed, or that the use as originally approved back in 1955, that this is just a continuation of that use, a modernization of that use? Is it amending that variance by special permit to allow for landscaping that seems to have been approved by all of the building inspectors going back to 1994? I guess from our perspective, it probably doesn't matter. But I think, town council can probably advise you, how do we get there? How do we stand behind what the town told my client they could do legally there? And, the other thing I want to bring up is that in 1955, the variance was, the property was a garden center. It had greenhouses there. It was operating back in the 50s, kind of the way those businesses operated in the 50s. Maybe now how they operate in the 2020s. I think that what they were adding at the time was retail, which is a different animal than gardening, than landscaping. Now you're bringing retail. You're having clients come, park, buy things on site. And so, that added component of retail was obviously a significant increase in the use back in 55. But we don't do retail there. So I think you could argue that the use today, although more modernized, is less intensive than what was allowed in 1955 when the Board of voted to approve retail on the site. Since then, it's been landscaping. Going back to the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, and you can go back and look at the records as far back as Tony Zagso and before. So my plea is that the board look at what the town used to, or provided that gave my client the ability and the comfort level to do this. And we've got to figure out a way to make that right. Otherwise, I just think it would just send a terrible, terrible message that that's how Chelmsford operates. You'll pull out the rug from someone. So, that's all. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Luskin, 34 Stedman Street. I think Mr. Eliopoulos has misinterpreted or misunderstood what my husband said about traffic. We are not blaming Mr. Fougere for any increase in traffic on Stedman Street. What we are saying is any increase of traffic on Dalton Road to his business increases traffic on Stedman Street as well. Trucks are not allowed on Dalton Road from North Road, so they all have to come up Stedman to Dalton. Also, I understand everybody wants a healthy town, but we don't want to attract businesses to the detriment of our residents and our communities and our neighborhoods. And Mr. Fougere's business certificate here states retail. I'm not sure what that means. Is he going to have trucks coming, other trucks coming to buy what the first trucks deliver? I'm not sure what retail on this certificate means. Thanks.
I'll let you speak, certainly.
May I?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to clarify the retail. So I have two businesses there. Landscape Supply, Landscape-ing. Landscape Supply sells to Landscape-ing. It's an accounting. There are no retail. No one shows up to my property to purchase a thing. The 4 years that I've been there, I have never even had a customer visit my home in any way, shape, or form. So Fougere Supply was created on behalf of my accountant so that we could wholesale and reuse our own wholesale supplies. Literally the only thing that you might be able to call retail where customers come to my property is in the giant parking lot that we own in front of the old flower shop, where my children have a wood shed where they sell bundles of wood for $5 a piece. So if that's the increase in traffic, terribly sorry. Trees cutting. There were 3 trees out back that we had to remove. 1 completely died and was a hazard. There were 2 that were wrapped in vines that were also a hazard. I had them inspected by 3 different tree companies. We tried to trim them, didn't fly, didn't work. They suggested we remove them. If that, again, the buffer, if that backyard buffer is an issue, I will very happily pull back trees, fences, whatever makes people happy. And as Philip just mentioned, this isn't the first time I've been at one of these types of town meetings. I sent a letter to everyone with my contact information, my cell phone, my address, and my email address, stating if anybody opposed or had concerns or anything whatsoever to please contact me, because I'm just a human and I might make mistakes because humans make mistakes. And I would love to put your mind at ease if there's anything I can do. But to be very, very, very clear, you've all been dealing with a business in my house and location for longer than we've all been alive, whether we like it or not. There has been a business there, there has always been a business there, and there isn't one person in this room who says that they could precedent and predate the businesses that have been there. So,
Maybe you, Charlie.
That's what I was going to say, Phil.
Good one.
I was going to say that.
But I reiterate and I repeat, regardless of who comes up before, during, and after me and has something else to say, I am human. I will fix things that bother people, but I am operating there by my right, and we came to this board because it was a suggestion to see what path we could go down so that we could make suggestions, so that we could bring things to light. I want to make things as right as rain as possible. I don't like confrontation. And like I said, I sent a letter. My cell phone's right there. It's on me 24/7. Ringer's on 24/7 for emergency. Not one person, including Mr. Thatcher himself, not one person reached out to me. And I have never opposed a neighbor. My neighbor to the right, she asked me to take down some walnut trees because they were dangerous. And what do? We took down the walnut trees. What do we put in their place? A 6-foot fence. My next neighbor, he said, hey man, I'm thinking about, getting a bunch of rescue dogs. And I said, all right, great. We also have rescue dogs. What were you thinking? Oh, well, if you could take some of that soil and you could burn this down so that we could put up a fence. I said, I'll do one better. I'll fix all of that soil area and grade it down for you. And if you buy the fence, I'll install it. And what did I do? I installed it. The next neighbor's down. Hey, Luke, we really like that idea. What do you think? I would love to do the same for you. No, would you mind teaching us how to install a fence? And I did. And then when we took those trees down that died and were covered in vines out back, I extended that fence to 1 foot before my corner. My neighbors on the left, they have a garden out back. It was all overgrown. I saw them out there. They're from South Africa. Unbelievably sweet couple. I saw them out there on like a 90-degree day with a weeding hoe. And I said, hey, I have a machine. I could do that in an hour. I will do that for you. No. You couldn't be how much can I pay you? We're neighbors. You shouldn't be paying me to be neighbors. I cleared a 1/4 of an acre for them in an hour because I have the ability to do so. Literally, not one person has complained to me until I wanted to better myself and to better the property. The piece of paper that they just handed out, that's proof of over 8,000 square feet of greenhouses. And I was told not to mention this building, but since Phil mentioned the building, I was shot down for a 2,400 square foot building with an overhang. 8,000 square feet of greenhouses. Environmental Gardens, I personally know Joe. I called the owner. He said he'd be willing to do an affidavit for me because of how much junk we're going through with the town and that one particular neighbor. So I'm not opposed to making changes. I'm not perfect. But until I hear them, there's nothing I can do.
Be interesting. My name is Larry Thatcher. There's been some disparaging comments tonight, which I would suggest that Mr. Fujaira's portrait of our encounter is grossly inaccurate, and I'll just leave it at that, because otherwise we could get into some rather other discussions. There's also been discussion tonight that suggests that there have been no complaints about this property. I beg to differ. As a public record, and Brian, I'll bring your attention to that, is that there is a public record in the street file of a complaint to the Zoning Board of Appeals dating back to 2019. And absolutely, would you care? I have lots of communications between you and I, where you reviewed it. You spoke to Sean Shanahan, and Sean Shanahan's recommendation at the time, after working with a year with him to try to alleviate the problems that Mr. Fujaira was having, that he was frustrated, and he recommended that we go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and request that you rescind his approval letter. That's a public record. So it's very disingenuous to say that there have been no complaints. It's really astounding to me that you talk about a small business and how we should invite a small business. As residents of the town, we have a reasonable expectation that zoning will protect our neighborhood. So it's about a reasonable expectation of Chelmsford residents that the zoning bylaws will be followed and enforced. But it's a sad day when it requires a resident who can't get resolution by complaining to the building inspector or to the zoning board of appeals, that we have to file a Section 7 letter demanding enforcement of zoning. That's why we're here today. So give some very strong thought to that. This application before you is not about how nice Mr. Fougere appears to be. It has nothing to do with that. Or how sincere he is about making a living. I perfectly believe that. Or it's not about how emotional or heartfelt anyone feels towards him or his family, or for that matter, any hardship that he might perceive that was due to his own decisions or actions. Or for that matter, information that he relied upon from others. It's about zoning. Fougere Landscaping is operating a contractor's yard. That is strictly prohibited in residential district. So keep in mind, it's a contractor's yard. We all talk about landscaping companies. We have a landscaping company in Chelmsford by the name of its town, Chelmsford Landscaping, that includes paving operations. So are we to believe here that, oh, let's grant Fougere Landscaping approval to operate there, that he could suddenly morph into something much larger even? So be very careful how you think about this. Other business owners in this town may manage some of their businesses from their homes, home occupation by right. We'll get to that in a moment. But many of them have their principal business operations off their residential property in a properly zoned district. So think about that. No one's stopping him from operating his business out of his home, just this particular grade of operation. Prior occupants of 150, 152 Dalton Road, we have a history here of probably of them engaging in use that was contrary to single-family residential zoning bylaws. Hands down, but various degrees to that. However, keep in mind that any prior oversight of a violation, for whatever reason, does not legitimize the violation. So we're here today, they're asking you to legitimize prior violations and grant them permission to run a contractor's yard in the middle of a residential area. You mentioned occupation by right. The town bylaws are very, very clear regarding the rules of engagement, the rules that you have to operate under to have a home occupation by right. Read those carefully and look at the statements that Fougere has made today about the number of vehicles he has, the amount of equipment, the usage of the property. Keep in mind that a contractor's yard, what's the definition of that? And that is strictly prohibited in our zoning, and the Zoning Board of Appeals is prohibited from granting a special permit for that. It states that any portion of a premises used by a building, landscaping, or construction professional for the outdoor storage of heavy equipment, materials, supplies, etc. That's the definition. It doesn't say so many square feet, or it's a little less intense than it was yesterday. It's any. So his operation today is in violation of zoning, and you should really look at it that way. My attorney, Henry Dane, has clearly laid out to you before you in his legal brief why this application should fail. It should fail. The residents of this town rely on the Zoning Board of Appeals to uphold the law, not bend over backwards for someone who does not even employ, probably does not, cannot speak for it, but certainly doesn't, has employees that may not be living in Chelmsford even. He's not contributing to the employment opportunities here extensively. So that argument kind of goes out the door. So I really suggest that you look carefully at this and deny this application outright. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from the audience? Seeing none, I'm going to suggest that we do a site walk. I don't know if anyone else feels the same, but I think it is probably
I thought
worth a
about it
look.
an hour ago. Yeah,
You thought of that an hour?
Yeah.
To save us an hour.
yeah, we could have.
If that sounds like a good idea,
I
I
just have
think
one
that,
question before we,
Oh, certainly,
so
certainly.
to Mr. Fuji. They spoke of deliveries on 18-wheelers. What do you get delivered on 18-wheelers to your property?
We answered that question last time. The gentleman got lost coming to our property and therefore got stuck. So we had to help him out of our property because you're not supposed to pull into that property with such a trunk.
So you don't get anything delivered on 18-wheelers? That
Less
wasn't
than an
fair.
average of once a month.
So
So
once a
you-
month, what would be on those deliveries?
Pallets of pavers,
Okay,
stone.
okay. Thank you.
Are you guys open to a site walk on the property? We'd have your
Absolutely. I've
permission.
been suggesting that since day one, yeah.
Just clarifying here, at, we're at day one, we're not
You know,
there
it's
anymore.
Pretty easy. Can't we just go individually at any time we want or something between
We'd
like
have to like walk into his
7 and 5?
backyard.
As long as we have permission.
Yeah, I mean, I live out front, so I would love some sort of a heads up. But yes.
I think an idea,
Pick
pick
a
a
day.
day. I know it's a busy time of year.
You're right.
Here we are, December 1st. Does the 10th, a Saturday, make sense to do a site walk?
Yeah, positively.
I'm more comfortable showing up in mass. I think that
Yeah.
there's equipment, there's
Sure.
children, there's just, does the 10th work for everyone to,
What time?
why don't you pick the time?
Yeah, you pick the time, Nancy.
It's good for you.
Just remember that needs to be noticed.
Is it 2 weeks or one?
It's 48 hours.
Oh, okay. So we'll just make sure of that. If the 10th works,
The 10th works for me.
10 a.m., 9
Morning
a.m.?
is probably better.
10,
10,
Okay.
10, got it.
We do
Sounds
10
good.
can we do
10
10:05?
o'clock. a.m.
Oh, can we do it? Can we do just after 10?
Yeah, like 10:05 would be.
Like
10, 10.
10:07.
Down the
I'm just
sidewalk
gonna
in
be
front
late.
of it.
10:03 to kind of compromise.
Got it.
a public meeting, the site visit?
It's not a public meeting, so a site visit, there's no testimony that's allowed to be taken. The only information that can be given is sort of directional, this is where, trucks would be stopping, this is, where this neighbor's property is, this is where the trees are, the berm, the fences, whatever.
Are there minutes taken?
No, there are no minutes taken during a site walk.
Can I suggest that you might consider also site walks of the abutting properties, which are grossly affected by his backyard operations?
I think if we can't get what we observe, I think that would be something we could consider. Are you comfortable with us entering your property at,
Absolutely.
say, 10:30 on the 10th of December?
You would need permission from whichever property owner you were gonna go
Well,
on there.
I'm considering him specifically. I mean, if we have other concerns that we can't visually see looking out, I suppose we can take those steps. I don't know how to straw poll the neighbors, so if Mr. Thatcher is comfortable with that and we feel the need, we can approach the site from his house and just see what's going on. That being said,
I might invite you to 79 Linwood also. We'd be happy to have you walk our backyard also.
She's directly behind.
yeah, if we find that to be necessary, we will do that. I mean, we're certainly trying to be CSI, just trying to get a feel for the place. So 10 o'clock on the 10th of December.
10:05.
10:10.
10:10? Troublemakers here?
That is a troublemaker.
Okay, I'll be there at 10. Anybody come to 10:10?
If there's anyone that can't make it and needs to just come singly, reach out.
Just contact them.
Contact us, and one-on-one, they can just come.
We'll be there around 10 if that's okay.
But if someone can't make it, we can schedule.
We'll accommodate them, okay. I just would feel better not having,
Yeah.
there's equipment, there's trucks, there's children, we should, be cognizant of that. Okay, so I guess a motion would be called for.
But since
motion-
I assume the record will be kept, the hearing will be kept open,
The hearing is
Yes.
open to the public.
so that there will be a continuance of this hearing to a subsequent date.
That's correct. It would be a continuance to January 5th,
January 5th. I'd like to make a motion to,
2023.
can I make a motion to continue the public hearing till January 5th?
2023.
2023,
I'll
okay.
second the motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's
Mr.
what we'll
Chairman,
do.
I don't know where the board is at with regards to the 100-day period. You to make your decision on the variance, but you may want to request an extension of that.
From the applicant.
Yes. Yeah.
So if we could ask you for a letter extending any potential, I think that,
you that agreement here.
I much appreciate your patience. I hope everyone got to say as they needed.
Yeah, of course.
And we close the hearing in general, or do the
You wanna do
continuance takes
minutes
care
or
of it?
no?
Gotta do minutes.
Yeah, we can do the minutes, yeah. No, I just, I meant, we're done with the hearing by posting a continuance, just no further.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Phil? Yeah, thanks for calling me old, Phil.
Hey, when's the planning board?
I was right there with you. I was gonna nudge him and be like, what about you, Charlie?
We just scheduled the continuation on my wife's birthday, so I'm gonna have her.
Oh, your wife's birthday, I'm so happy.
Let me get you her personal number first.
Okay, Phil.
Take care now.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from November, what's the date? November, whatever. It does.
I can't accept your testimony, sir, but does it concern the application?
Yeah, oh.
Go, sir.
Okay. I saw that and I was like, oh, maybe I just didn't know. And I was gonna
Darn
ask.
it, don't tell me anything.
Okay.
Order of the names to go with how we were sitting, but I didn't change the title.
Yeah, I didn't know if that actually changed. So.
Charlie's the vice chair?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, when did Jamie become it? I didn't know that. Like, that's strange, but okay.
Sure, sure, yeah. Thank you.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, too. Yeah, thanks for your
I
help
understand what you're
on
saying,
that.
yeah.
We solved it
Obviously
quickly
can't
today.
answer
so-
This is still on. Thank you guys for your time.
It was on today?
I appreciate it,
Thank you.
seriously.
Have a good holiday.
In all honesty, I'm very glad everybody gets to speak their mind, because I want to put things to rest.
I understand what you're saying. It's a difficult position to be in. Everyone's trying for their direction, if you would.
Yep. Have a good weekend.
You too. Enjoy your holidays.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, were we talking about the minutes or something? Talking about the minutes
The
now?
minutes, yes.
So I will make a motion to approve the November 3rd, 2022 minutes with the revision of Charlie being indicated as the vice chair and not Jamie.
I'm so sorry, Charlie.
That's fine with me.
She dethroned you.
I'd like to second that.
Well, happy
motion.
holidays. We'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay, Paul. I'll second.
Appreciate you being here. The clarity was well,
My pleasure. Paul, I feel like I ask if you can be at like every other meeting. I'm like,
It's so much
Paul, come to
more
that meeting.
clear
Come on.
and.
Yeah.
it's like when the principal's here, you know?
Do we all agree? Can we close?
I second.
Oh,
Can we all agree?
are we all,
Okay.
can we
The
approve the
chairman
minutes?
is.
Charlie's only
I agree.
seconding because you said he's the vice chair, so that makes him happy.
It's a power
Can we
play. I can
take-
see it coming round.
Can we take turns on who gets to be the vice chair?
Are the minutes
It'll be our
approved? Are we good? Are we good?
That's what
Did
you're
we-
voting on right now.
Right, so there's a motion to approve the minutes by Erin.
Nope.
Mike?
Nancy.
Yeah.
Erin seconded.
Sure, I second it.
Nope,
Sure.
Charlie second.
Charlie
Seconded.
seconded. Once he gets the vice chair, he's got all the
It's
power.
late.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Motion to adjourn.
And that was Nancy.
All
When we
right.
gonna
Good
talk
night.
about something before we adjourn?
Like
though?
you have somewhere to be almost.